case of Sheila LaBarre, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always, they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others, but sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Raine believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila LaBarre. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila LaBarre was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila LaBarre? Sheila LaBarre was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father, the head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour or frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters, and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn, Manuel from an early age forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice. Adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time, she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, LaBarre, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Sheila was frankly annoyed with the child, and she would raise her hand or lock her in a closet if she started crying or acting up. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just Strasut filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them. But all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners, both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill LaBarre. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon LaBarre invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself LaBarre. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, but soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on, he would be her only man. But soon he realized that he was wrong, because his wife continued to meet with different men. Wayne was not satisfied with this, and one day he jumped with fists on Sheila and her next lover, causing them bodily harm. Accustomed to being dominated, Sheila for the first time didn't know how to deal with her third husband, who got into a fight every time a rival appeared on the horizon. Eventually, she filed for divorce and sought a court injunction to stop Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Another divorce did not affect the turbulent personal life of Sheila, who continued to meet with numerous lovers, changing them like gloves. True, now her relationship increasingly often began to end with lawsuits from men who accused Sheila not just in cruelty, but also in the threat to their lives and health. Thus, one of her boyfriends she deliberately hit by a car and almost ran over. Another almost broke his head, and another scratched his face so that he was forever scarred. Sheila, with age, became more and more dangerous to others. From every man she demanded obedience, and in cases of disobedience, fell into a rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Bill LaBarre died of heart failure. Although doctors and police officers did not see a criminal trail in the death of an elderly man, his family members were convinced that Sheila had something to do with it. In their opinion, she had been poisoning Bill little by little for years, and literally drove him into the light. Despite the fact that Bill and Sheila were never officially married, Sheila, according to the will, became the sole heiress of all his property. The relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They are still convinced that the mistress forced Bill to write the will she wanted. House of Temptation. After Bill's death, as I have already mentioned, all his property came under Sheila's complete control. Now she no longer had to consider anyone's opinion. She could do whatever she wanted with the estate she had inherited. She herself called her home a place of seduction and pleasure where there were no inhibitions. She met men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, lured them to her, and then tried to keep them on the ranch as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or any physical appearance. She promised them unearthly pleasure and then sought to suppress and subjugate them to her will. Sheila regularly tried to seduce couriers by meeting them in the nude and offering an alternative method of payment. But she didn't take into account the fact that she herself was not getting any younger and was nowhere near as attractive as she used to be. It got to the point where couriers simply refused to come to her address. Neighbors noticed that on the ranch LaBarre constantly come different men, but some hurried to leave the place the same day. Others were delayed, but also for a short time. What was going on in the house itself could only be guessed at. Where had Michael DeLorge disappeared to? Soon, Sheila decided to look for lovers among men who were in dire need of housing, money, or those men who suffered from addiction. This category was the most vulnerable, and proved to be an easy prey for the cunning woman, who everywhere posed as a widowed millionaire, and talked about her untold wealth, inherited by her. In 2004, LaBarre met on one of the city streets homeless man named Michael DeLodge. He was in a difficult life situation and lost literally everything because of addiction to illegal drugs. His relatives tried to send him to a rehabilitation clinic, but he ran away from there and has been loitering ever since. Sheila liked Michael, and she invited him to her, promising shelter, food, and the necessary drugs in exchange for intimacy. Moving to the ranch, the guy was completely dependent on his old mistress. He complied with all her demands, afraid to be on the street again. But Sheila quickly got into the taste, and her desires became more and more sophisticated. She bound, beat, and humiliated Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they wouldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Sheila found him each time and brought him back to the ranch. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. His loved ones immediately responded to this disturbing news, but it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLorge disappeared without a trace. When his family contacted Sheila directly, she stated that she and Michael had broken up. He had left her, and his current whereabouts were unknown to her. Michael did not show up at any of the places he had been to before. No one who knew him had seen him, and there was no way to contact him. Contacting the police was fruitless, and LaBarre remained beyond suspicion, trusting Kenny County. Sheila's tales of her exorbitant wealth were greatly exaggerated, and the house and automobile had to be maintained, so she was forced to get a job. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, he had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy LaBarre was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time, intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. But he could not leave the house of the mistress who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors who periodically noticed the guy and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled and even frightened by the guy's appearance that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at LaBarre's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find LaBarre at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings, but that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and there were 2 empty fuel cans lying nearby, the same ones the boy had bought at the local store the day before. But that wasn't all. Also found on the property were the remains of Michael Deloge, who had disappeared a few years earlier, and some fingers of some third guy who was never identified. Among other things, a large number of items belonging, judging by the size, to various men were fished out of the sump at the ranch, the fates of which have not been learned. The hostess herself was not at home at the time of the police visit. She had figured it out and gone on the run. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston, where she obviously hoped to get lost. Moreover, on the way, she seduced one of the drivers who gave her a ride, and he trustingly invited her to live in his house. However, the next day, having seen on TV news about the search for a dangerous criminal, the new lover himself called the police and reported that Sheila is now in his bed. It was there that she was arrested. During the search of Sheila's home, another frightening find was made: a box of videotapes. On the tapes, Kenny, Michael, and several other men confessed to horrific crimes, but judging by the guy's appearance and condition, they made these confessions under torture. Since LaBarre's arrest, her mental health has raised a lot of questions, so the court ordered the necessary evaluations. Sheila was found to have a delusional disorder, as well as signs of schizophrenia. She called herself an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. It was Sheila's failing mental health that became the basis on which her attorney tried to build a defense. He called his client a profoundly sick person and tried to prove that she was not aware of her actions. The reason for this was the mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. The defendant herself claimed that many years ago, when she was in that terrible accident and found herself in a coma on the verge of death, she met with God, and the latter told her to cleanse the world of men who infringe on children. Sheila's ex-husbands and some of Sheila's lovers also spoke in court, who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Ennis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. LaBarre in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the time of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility. Any life, even the most shameful, can be wrapped up in a beautiful wrapper. If you tell it in a calm voice and present the negative character as a victim of circumstances, you are sure to feel sympathy and regret for him. The fact is that many bad people have charisma, strength, cunning, and we sincerely believe that they were not always bad, because often they made such circumstances, and we, without noticing, find excuses for their disreputable deeds. But today we will not justify illegal actions and certainly will not cover anyone. After learning about this case, you will decide for yourself whether their actions are worth justification. On April 4, 2015, emergency services received an eerie call from a local resident. A terrified male voice yelled into the phone to the dispatcher that he had gone into a friend's living room to turn on the lights and check on him, but when he went up to the second floor of the room, he saw blood everywhere. The victim's friend reported that everything was covered in blood, and the injured man was not breathing. After police arrived, the unincorporated community of Alette in Montgomery County was shocked by the brutal murder of 59-year-old local resident Charles Taylor. The crime scene looked like the subject of nightmares and resembled the set of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, on the carpet, on the paintings, and the couch where the murdered man was located was completely soaked in blood. The brutality of the crime made it look like a grudge drama. After all, definitely, the attacker wanted not only Charles's death, but also to cause him as long as possible unbearable pain, time after time stabbing a sharp knife. The examination of the house showed no visible signs of forced entry, and Charles's bloody body was lying upstairs in his room, which meant that the criminal knew the house and acted decisively. The forensic medical examination found that Charles Taylor suffered blunt force trauma to the back of his head and 31 stab wounds, as a result of which he died. Charles Taylor was considered a kind and generous man, had an adult son with whom he had a good relationship. He adored his 2 grandchildren and daughter-in-law Amanda. This is the part of life that people see and draw conclusions about the family's well-being. But was this really how things were in the Taylor family? So let's get to the bottom of this ugly family drama. The initial investigation was relatively slow as the police didn't have many leads to work with. They started looking for Charles's acquaintances, but couldn't find anyone who had a motive or intent to harm him. Then came the theory that it was someone in Charles Taylor's family, and it didn't take them long to find out the name of the assailant. In fact, that's when investigators got lucky and were approached by a crime blogger with photos of Amanda Taylor posing for selfies against Charles's lifeless body. She has been put on the wanted list. Amanda Barbara Nicole Taylor was born on March 27, 1991 in Christiansburg, Virginia. There is not much information about Amanda's childhood. It is only known that it was difficult because both of her parents spent some time in prison. Amanda's youth began with a lot of problems that she created for herself. After meeting Mariah Roback, Amanda's illicit life began a merry-go-round. Together, they got into a lot of trouble. On October 23, 2005, according to Montgomery County Sheriff's records, when the girls were just 12 years old, Amanda and Mariah jumped into a car and ran away from home, which they were charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. In early April 2006, Amanda was charged with disorderly conduct at the middle school she attended. She yelled that she hated the place, hated all the people there, and would definitely kill them all. This incident definitely went beyond the threshold of the standard teen drama. And this is only a small known portion of Amanda's police station record. In 9th grade, Amanda met Rex Taylor, who was 2 years older than her, and they began dating. Amanda and Rex were born on the same day, March 27th. They both considered it a sign from above. Amanda dropped out of school completely when she found out she was expecting a baby. She and Rex married and soon had a son, but motherhood did not stop her criminal tendencies. The years of her married life were also punctuated by more run-ins with the law. The number of reports on Amanda Taylor in the police station grew exponentially, so recorded another attempted absconding after stealing a vehicle, a conviction for possession of alcohol, numerous domestic altercations, and a criminal record for possession of a controlled substance. Her husband, Rex Taylor, was not from a model family either, and despite their devotion to each other, Rex desperately struggled with addictions and the depression they caused. From the age of 15, the young lad had an addiction to illegal substances. After a while, the couple had a daughter, and at first, it seemed that Amanda still took up the mind and became a model mother and wife, let even a little not like all American women in their 20s, and with piercings, tattoos, and certainly daily selfies in social networks. But also the family relationship between Amanda and Rex was not quite ordinary. The couple fanatically studied biographies of famous serial criminals and wrote letters to them in prison. Amanda began fantasizing about becoming a criminal herself. But before Amanda could realize this deadly dream, tragedy struck the family. The complicated relationship between the spouses was overshadowed by Amanda's suspicions of her husband's infidelity. In April 2014, their paths finally separated, and the couple parted. Rex returned to the family home, where he again began to use illegal substances. 4 months after the move, his lifeless body was discovered in a shed on the property. He had hanged himself on the day of his son's 7th birthday. After losing her beloved husband, Amanda lived with her mother and friend Mariah Roback from time to time. While staying with her friend Mariah, she also began a friendship with Sean Ball, another member of the Roback family. On March 27, 2015, on their shared birthday, Amanda went to Rex's grave and attempted to end her life. She was rescued and forcibly admitted to a psychiatric hospital because her antics and thought processes were clearly distorted and could bring harm to her and others. But despite her mother's insistence and pleas for prolonged treatment, Amanda was quickly released home. Once she was released from the psychiatric hospital, the situation seemed to escalate because of her unstable personality problems. So Mariah and her husband asked Amanda to move out. They also kicked out Mr. Ball, who had fallen madly in love with Amanda. It was during this period of time, when her only true friends seemed to have turned their backs on her, that Amanda developed a deep desire to kill, and the inspiration for this was none other than her late husband, Rex Taylor. She wanted to do Rex justice and make him proud of her, and to do that, it was imperative that someone be skillfully taken dead. During his lifetime, Rex also had a fascination with serial criminals, so much so that his interest had long gone beyond a hobby. He socialized closely with criminals, and it was a friendship he was proud of in his lifetime. Imagine walking out of your house one morning to your mailbox and finding an envelope addressed to you from a notorious serial criminal who was arrested in 1980. Inside the envelope, you are relieved to find no creepy mementos, but instead find a birthday card for your young child along with a handwritten message. Some might argue that such a message would be as horrifying as receiving a severed finger or strand of hair. Either way, for most people, receiving anything in the mail from a serial criminal would be abnormal, but not for Amanda and Rex Taylor's family. Rex's behavior and his willingness to communicate and receive experiences from known serial criminals and Amanda's obsession with crime has been confirmed by some horrifying revelations of past social media posts under her account. In several posts, Amanda glorifies a mass of criminals and their brutal attacks, including the mastermind behind the largest terrorist attack in American history, Timothy McVeigh, and two young men, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, who staged a mass crime at Collin High School. She aspired to become one of those ruthless criminals she idolized so much, and of course decided to start her career as a criminal with a vengeance. After a while, Amanda accused Rex's father, Charlie Taylor, of being responsible for her husband's death, claiming that he had not helped Rex get rid of his addiction to pills, but had instead accustomed his son to illegal substances. And the cynicism and cold-bloodedness with which she took revenge on her father-in-law, Charlie Taylor, will send shivers down your spine. To commit her first major murder, she needed an assistant who would unconditionally agree with her actions. She was afraid she wouldn't be able to do it all by herself the first time, and she needed a willing accomplice to back her up if she got scared. And one Amanda already had, of course. It was the man in love with her, Sean Ball. The day she would take control of him was only a matter of time. Sean soon became the willing accomplice Amanda was looking for. However, he had no idea what he was getting himself into. So Sean and Amanda devised their sinister plan with military precision and put it into action. On a spring April afternoon in 2015, Amanda and Sean went to Charles Taylor's dilapidated home in nearby Ironton, Virginia, at exactly 3:27 in the afternoon, the number that marks Rex and Amanda's birth dates. Charles had to give her money to fill an Easter basket for her beloved grandchildren. They sat and talked sweetly for about 30 minutes. Then Amanda plopped down on the couch next to Charles, and it was as if a switch had been flicked in her head. Amanda's behavior changed dramatically. She violently began stabbing Charles with a knife, at which time Sean hit Charles in the head with a tire iron. Then after stunning Charles, Amanda again deeply stabbed the knife into his chest. At this point, it was like she couldn't see anything around her from rage, and Charles just looked at her and asked, "What are you doing?" As she stabbed him, he reached out and grabbed her hair, but Amanda continued to stab him, and he continued to scream. Amanda Taylor stabbed her father-in-law, Charles Taylor, 31 times with a sharp bayonet knife. Every time she looked into his eyes, it was important to her that he knew she was the one who was killing him, and she wanted to feel his last breath. She wanted death for Charles to be a personal revenge. She stopped as her rage began to subside and the entire room was splattered with blood. But Amanda didn't stop there. She did something even more outrageous by taking a picture of herself next to the body and posting the picture on her social media accounts. Later that day, Amanda's mother received a disturbing phone call from an unknown number. With Amanda's voice on the other end of the line, she confessed through tears how much she loved her mom and how precious everything she had done for her, and through her tears, she shared that she had done what she had to do, and it was something very bad. Her mom sensed the situation, and it was clear to her that something terrible had happened. She begged her daughter to come home to Christiansburg, but Amanda refused the idea and stated that she and Sean were on their way to Pittsburgh. It was no secret that Amanda was on a downward spiral, and it all started with a traumatic event that occurred almost 8 months ago when her husband, Rex Taylor, who had struggled with depression and illicit substance abuse for several years, hanged himself. Authorities were subsequently shocked when they checked Amanda's social media profile. She was clearly very proud of the crime she had committed. Hoping for a quick resolution, the police issued a warrant for her arrest. However, by then, Amanda and Sean had already escaped. Amanda and Sean took a rather scenic route to escape, as if they were not on the run, but planning a wonderful vacation. They took the Blue Ridge Parkway from Virginia to North Carolina. Judging from the crime scene photos, which show the sheer brutality of the crime, The officers had great fears that the perpetrators would continue to kill. And they were right, for Amanda didn't stop there. However, Amanda was not going to go unpunished for her crimes. After carrying out her intended crimes, she planned to eventually punish herself as well. Nor did she seek to keep her deed a secret. Shortly after she went on the road with Sean Ball, she began publishing posts on social media, taking responsibility for the murder and explaining that she did it for her husband. But Amanda and Sean weren't just on the run, they were stalking their next victim. Having committed her first crime, which Amanda thought was perfect, she couldn't stop. She needed to keep killing. At a gas station, they withdrew cash, filled up the car, and proceeded to Tennessee. Sean tried to talk Amanda into stopping and just going on the run, hiding, laying low. But Amanda, having tasted blood, was determined to fulfill her desire to commit another crime, and she would come very close. They stocked up on ammunition at a sporting goods store, then stopped at a Fleabag motel in Tennessee. After spending the night in a roadside motel, they left the next day to fulfill Amanda's bloody wish. Along the way, Amanda notices two young girls at a rest stop on Blue Ridge Boulevard who could be her next victims. She told Sean that she was going to bring these girls in so he could shoot them. They needed money, and he agreed, so Amanda went out to lead them to the car. But when she brought them in, Sean refused to shoot them. Amanda was furious. She got back in the car and drove away. Unable to calm down, she stopped the car in the driveway and pounced on her accomplice. Sean was now in her sights. Amanda pulled a revolver out of the glove compartment, got out of the car, and walked to the passenger side where Sean sat with his eyes closed in terror. She was so beyond furious, but she spotted a random jogger right in front of her and quickly pointed the gun at him and pulled the trigger. As luck would have it, Amanda missed, and the sound of the gunshot made Sean open his eyes and come to his senses. He saw that the muzzle of the revolver was pointed at him. Amanda said that before she killed him, she wanted him to know that she was only using it for the gun and the car. She then pulled the trigger, shooting Sean right in the face. Amanda took a picture of Sean's bloody face to post on social media and drove off, leaving him bleeding on the side of the road from the gunshot wound. Now, she was on the run alone. They had guns, firearms, they had stolen them from a relative's house, and they had already bought ammunition and magazines for the same weapon, said Police Captain New. They both seemed to be in agreement on what was going to happen, and it was going to start with the murder of Charles Taylor. Police were on the trail, and Amanda continued to post notes. In her next social media post, she revealed that she took Sean's life. While at a traffic stop in a field, Amanda took a picture of a silver revolver in her lap and posted it to Instagram with a caption. The post was more like a suicide note. Okay, it's about that time. I'm going to find my husband in hell and finally find peace. I love you, Mom, and my beautiful children, and I know you will give them the life I could never give them. I will finally be free. The cops were actively monitoring Amanda's account in hopes of tracking her down, and they did. Surveillance video from gas stations along the route of the white SUV the perpetrators fled in also helped police get on the trail. Cell tower signals were able to locate Amanda on a North Carolina state highway. Patrol officers spotted the white SUV heading east on I-40 near Asheville when she tried to stop. No matter how much she ran, she didn't give up without a fight. Law enforcement prepared, they knew she was armed and extremely dangerous. This reality was further reinforced by another sobering social media post that surfaced later that day that said, "Okay, the time is about to come when I find my husband in hell and finally become one with him." In her photo, Amanda looks smug, like she's proud of what she's done. After a 2-mile stretch of spikes that were strategically placed in Amanda's path, eventually all the destruction and chaos was over. Amanda was taken into custody around 8 o'clock the next morning. Police officers pulled Amanda out of the car and handcuffed her. Sean was found dying on the side of the road by paramedics. In the interrogation room, Amanda acted as if she didn't care about what was happening. She was sipping a soft drink and playing with her hair before Captain Robert New and another detective walked in. When questioned, Amanda waived her right to remain silent and confess to everything. She really did look like she felt at home. After talking to the investigators, Amanda learned that Sean wasn't dead. The bullet had gone right through his jaw, causing him to pass out from the pain, but otherwise leaving no marks on him. Then, in a blood-chilling revelation, Amanda announced that she wanted to go to the death chamber. "Do you have a choice? I would prefer just the death penalty," Amanda says in the interrogation tape. "I kill people. I deserve to die. It would be better if I just go. It would be better for my children if I could just get the death penalty and go." Then, in a stunning turn of events, Amanda found herself recanting her words and pleading not guilty in front of the court. But at the trial, Amanda did recount her crime in great detail and insisted that she had done the right thing in taking the life of old Charles, who had taken Rex from her. She said that at first she'd been very angry with Rex for doing that to her, but then she'd been more angry with his father. Amanda admitted that she wanted Charles to feel the same pain that she had felt. Her argument was that she had killed Charles because she blamed him for the death of her husband Rex, whom Charles had allegedly given illegal substances to, according to Amanda. And the moment Charles started talking about Rex again, Amanda looked at him and started stabbing him, and it became the most alive thing she had felt since Rex had died. She admitted that she was very happy in those moments when the knife entered her father-in-law. Finally, Amanda vented all of her accumulated hatred and anger. She did it to get attention, and by not pleading guilty, she got the opportunity to talk about the case, said Captain Robert New. Amanda's explanation is disgusting. After all, she compares the feeling of the crime to a happy memory. At the November 2015 trial, the jury heard how Amanda stabbed Charles 31 times, and that she aimed for his face and chest. It took the jury just 30 minutes to find Amanda Taylor guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. The judge called her the epitome of evil. As part of the plea bargain, Sean Ball agreed to a suspended 60-year sentence after 41 years in prison. Sean admitted that he is not worthy of sympathy and is completely remorseful for what he did. But there is a guilt that he has to live with every day and wonder what caused this to happen in his life. Sean Ball was jailed for 41 years after admitting to second-degree murder as part of a plea bargain. The 60-year prison sentence was suspended, except that Ball had to serve 41 years and 1 month. Amanda recently appealed her conviction and lost. She said she plans to appeal her conviction to the Supreme Court if she has to. Obviously, Amanda didn't become a serial offender, but she gained notoriety as a killer selfie taker. Amanda Taylor made a heartbreaking confession during a phone interview for a popular show from prison. When asked about why she took selfies with her body, she said, "I was just really excited and thought I wanted to take a picture so I could post it and show everyone. It made me really happy finally." She said she has absolutely no remorse for what she did to Charles Taylor because she did exactly what she wanted to do. Amazingly, during this time, she gave a local reporter a phone interview in which she compared the thrill of being stabbed to riding a roller coaster. She said, "It was like my first roller coaster ride because of all the nerves and the feeling of freedom. That's how I felt. It wasn't what I had in mind at all. It's not what you see in the movies. It's a real animal sensation." Amanda Taylor had committed a terrible crime and wanted more. People who knew Amanda Taylor described her as a very dark and sinister woman who was obsessed with death, crime, and serial offenders from a young age. Her social media pages were filled with images of bizarre death scenes. If any woman has ever gone insane, it's Amanda Taylor, and it's so often the case that it wasn't supposed to happen. The people who loved her tried their best to stop her madness, and the people she turned to for help turned a blind eye. Now Amanda is being punished for all the destruction she was so encouraged by. This is how the career of Amanda Taylor, who dreamed of becoming a famous serial criminal, ended. Each of us goes through different phases in life, going through our own traumas and experiences. And when we look at bad heroes, learn about their past, we unwittingly try it on ourselves. Admit it. Have you ever dreamed of killing the neighbor who listens to music loudly at night or pisses you off because he parks in your spot? But reconsider the story, and better just shout by the lake or in the woods. They say it calms and returns moral balance. Jenna Burley's case was at a friend's birthday party, found in a plastic container outside of town. It's difficult to judge a stranger's intentions based solely on their appearance or conversation. Sometimes, a stranger may seem perfectly presentable, behave politely, and act at first glance out of the best intentions, offering help. However, in reality, it's often precisely these individuals who lull their chosen victim into a false sense of security, luring them to a deserted place to rob, kidnap, take advantage of, or end their life. Unfortunately, the victim often realizes too late that they've fallen into a deadly trap. The story of an ordinary American student and popular blogger named Jenna Burley in 2017 shocked the entire country. Initially, thousands of people participated in the search for the missing girl, hoping she was alive. But when the terrifying truth was revealed, no one could believe what had happened. The girl had simply gone to celebrate her friend's birthday, but this party turned out to be the last night of her life. A tragic mix-up, intoxication, and the naive desire to trust a charming stranger who, coincidentally, offered his help, led to the tragedy. Who was Jenna Burley? Jenna Nicole Burley was born on November 4, 1994, in the capital of Pennsylvania, the city of Harrisburg, as the second of 4 children to Edward and Jacqueline Burley. Her parents met in the late 80s while attending university in Philadelphia, where mutual feelings quickly blossomed, and they never parted after that. The couple married in the fall of 1991, and in 1992 their first child was born, a daughter named Janelle. 2 years later, the heroine of our story was born, and soon after, their sons, Jeffrey and Jacob, followed one after the other. The Burleys dedicated themselves to helping others. Jacqueline worked in a nursing home, and Edward was employed at a hospital, specializing in patient rehabilitation after injuries and illnesses. The couple raised their children in an atmosphere of love and mutual understanding, striving to give them the best. Jenna was always very close to her parents, as well as her brothers and sister. She grew up as an active, positive, and energetic girl with a creative streak, strong charisma, and leadership qualities. She always had plenty of friends, performed well in school, acted in the school theater from a young age, and adored animals. The Burley family was neither wealthy nor struggling. They settled in Philadelphia in a spacious house located in the quiet, cozy neighborhood of Harleysville. Jenna easily integrated into any group, quickly made friends, and became the life of the party. In high school, the girl dreamed of becoming a fashion designer, constantly experimenting with looks and styles, sometimes appearing quite extravagant. Jenna wore bright makeup, dyed her hair in various colors, and dressed in different styles, sometimes resembling a hippie, other times an adherent of the emo subculture. She loved standing out from the crowd and encouraged her friends to challenge the mundane routine as well. The teenage girl frequently attended concerts, festivals, and other mass events that served as sources of inspiration for her. As she neared the end of high school, Burley's views and interests began to shift. Now she dreamed of a career in film rather than fashion design. She learned to create short films during classes at a local film studio, where her talent was already evident as she approached each storyline and creation process with creativity. At that time, Jenna also registered on several social networks where she actively maintained her pages, sharing her life, interests, and philosophical reflections on various pressing social issues. Very quickly, the high school senior gained a large following and her audience grew rapidly. People seemed to enjoy following this vibrant, creative girl who constantly experimented with her appearance and encouraged others to embrace self-expression. Before she knew it, Jenna had become a rather popular blogger, with an audience of several thousand followers. In 2013, the 18-year-old high school graduate enrolled in a prestigious college in sunny Florida, where she studied media arts and filmmaking. While studying, the student continued to actively maintain and develop her blog, sharing stories about campus life, the subjects she was studying, her community involvement, as well as parties and other entertainment with friends. Serious injury and prolonged depression. On December 20th, 2013, after completing just one semester of college, Jenna came home to celebrate Christmas with her family. At that time, Philadelphia had already seen snow, and the weather was quite harsh. Jenna didn't consider the sharp contrast from Florida and wore completely inappropriate shoes, which caused her to slip and fall, seriously injuring her ankle before even reaching the house. An X-ray revealed a double fracture with displacement, requiring surgery, along with the insertion of special pins and plates. For several months, Burley was literally confined to a wheelchair as she couldn't put any weight on her foot. She then had to relearn how to walk and attended daily physiotherapy sessions. During this period, she also managed to catch pneumonia, significantly complicating and prolonging her recovery. The student was forced to take an academic leave to focus on restoring her health, which greatly upset her. The only solace she found was in her personal blog, where she published excerpts from her journal entries and thoughts, and in social media, where Jenna actively communicated with her followers. Jenna posted new videos almost daily, answering questions and discussing various topics. A passionate animal rights activist, she spoke out against zoos, dolphinariums, and other places where animals are kept in captivity and exploited for entertainment. She also highlighted the difficult plight of the homeless, noting that in states with warm and mild climates, they have it much easier than in Pennsylvania, where those without a roof over their heads risk freezing to death on the streets. In addition, Jenna, who had already been engaged in regular charity work, began organizing fundraising efforts to donate essential items to animal shelters and homeless shelters. During her rehabilitation, Jenna took up making handmade jewelry which she sold online, donating all the proceeds to those in need. She actively encouraged her followers to donate unwanted items to charity, emphasizing that what might seem like trash cluttering a closet to some could be a real treasure for someone less fortunate. The recovery period dragged on, and Jenna ended up spending almost a year at home instead of just a few months. During this time, she adopted a dog from a local shelter whom she absolutely adored, and she mentioned her pet daily in her blog, sharing stories of how they spent their days together. But despite her seemingly optimistic outlook, Jenna fell into a deep depression. In the fall of 2014, she candidly admitted that she could no longer cope on her own and had to seek professional help from a psychiatrist. Burley spoke openly about the mental health challenges she faced, sharing her doctor's recommendations and discussing how her family and pet supported her. The blogger's audience grew several times during this period, as many young people related to the struggles she described and thanked her for her honesty. In early 2015, Jenna, along with her father and younger brother Jacob, went on a trip to sunny California. Jenna felt much better, as she wrote in her social media posts, and the happy photos from the ocean shore clearly showed the strong bond she had with her family. The eternal student. After fully recovering and taking the trip with her family, Jenna decided not to return to Florida, but instead transferred to a school in her hometown, choosing to live at her parents' house. She enrolled at Montgomery County Community College, a suburb of Philadelphia. Meanwhile, Burley continued to maintain her blog and produced short videos on various topics. In 2017, after earning a bachelor's degree in the humanities, Jenna decided to enroll in a university and became a student at Temple University's School of Film. Since the campus was only a half-hour drive away, Jenna chose not to move into a dormitory, but to stay at her family home. By that time, she had renovated her room and acquired her own car, so she didn't need to rely on family members for rides to class. At the time she entered the university, Jenna was already 22 years old, making her 4 to 5 years older than her classmates. Nevertheless, they were on the same wavelength, hanging out, having fun, attending concerts, and celebrating each other's birthdays. It's worth noting that Temple University is located almost in the center of the city and is one of the largest higher education institutions in the country. The campus is surrounded by numerous shops, shopping centers, restaurants, pubs, and other venues, so life here is bustling, you could say, 24/7. students always have a place to relax and unwind after classes. Classes began at the end of August, and just a few days later, Jenna got into a car accident on her way to school. Fortunately, she was wearing her seatbelt and wasn't injured, but her car was seriously damaged. From then on, her father or one of her younger brothers usually drove her to school in the mornings. Occasionally, Jenna would stay overnight at friends' houses if she stayed in the city late, always informing her parents beforehand. Fatal mix-up at the party. On Wednesday, August 30th, 2017, Jenna's classmate and close friend, named Davis, was planning to celebrate his birthday at one of the bars. Jenna was among those invited to the party and was supposed to stay overnight at the birthday boy's place so they could head to class together on Thursday morning. She informed her parents in advance so they wouldn't worry. That evening, Jenna, Davis, and 5 other friends had a great time, taking photos and posting them on social media. They hopped from bar to bar, meeting other friends along the way who joined their group, congratulating the birthday boy and toasting to his health. By around 11 p.m., the group had changed significantly, and everyone was pretty tipsy. Around midnight, the friends found themselves in a small sports bar that was packed with people. The birthday boy had stepped away because his friends had arranged a surprise for him, kidnapping him and taking him to another venue. He informed Burley about this and asked her to text him what time she would arrive at his apartment to spend the night. Jenna stayed in the bar with the rest of the group. Several people who were sober and driving offered Jenna a ride wherever she wanted to go, and a few classmates invited her to stay over at their place. But Jenna said she had already made plans with Davis and would go to his place. However, by around 1 a.m., friends began to leave, and Burley didn't notice that everyone who had offered her a place to stay or a ride had simply disappeared. A mix-up occurred, leading to tragic consequences. Jenna believed until the last moment that she would leave with someone from the bar, and she said goodbye to her friends, assuring them that she would stay a little longer. When she finally realized what was happening, she was sitting at the bar next to a group of strangers who soon left as well. The bar was closing at 2 a.m., and Jenna, realizing she was all alone, started texting Davis, asking him to come pick her up. However, the guy had fallen asleep at home, and his phone was in another room, so he didn't hear anything. Jenna tried to contact a few other friends, but they were either too drunk to respond or didn't hear their phones. She didn't want to bother her parents, and walking through the city alone at night didn't seem safe. The disappearance of the student. When Davis woke up in the morning, he thought Jenna had stayed over at someone else's place, but after checking his phone, he became seriously concerned. Jenna had tried to call him twice and sent several messages asking if he could pick her up from the bar, with the last message containing only 2 words: "Help me." He tried to call her back, but her phone was turned off. He still hoped that his friend was okay and would show up at class as usual, but Burley never appeared at the university. Davis called and visited all the friends who had partied with them at the bar the night before, but none of them had hosted the student. In the afternoon, one of Jenna's friends called her parents to ask if she had returned home. When they responded no, she explained what had happened, and within half an hour, Edward and Jacqueline rushed to the campus. They spoke with their daughter's friends, trying to find out who had seen her last and where. After getting no useful information, the Burleys immediately went to the police to report their daughter missing, insisting on an immediate search operation. The urgency of the situation was heightened by the messages asking for help that Jenna had sent to several classmates. The first places checked were the academic buildings and dormitories, but there was no sign of the missing student. The police then contacted local hospitals, but no women matching Jenna's description had been admitted in the past 24 hours. Everyone who had interacted with her the previous night confirmed that the last time they saw the student was at the sports bar. She was wearing blue jeans, a white t-shirt with a motivational slogan on the front, and a light blue hoodie tied around her waist. Another distinguishing feature was her hairstyle, long black hair braided into 2 pigtails. Since Burley was a fairly popular blogger, news of her disappearance quickly spread across social media. Thousands of her followers posted messages asking for help in finding her and urged anyone with information to come forward. The generous and persistent stranger. When the police arrived at the bar where the missing student was last seen, the bartender immediately remembered the girl with the braids who stayed late after everyone else had left. She was quite drunk, seemed confused, and was constantly texting and calling someone. The signal from her phone was last detected in the same neighborhood around 2 a.m. Surveillance footage from the cameras at the entrance and inside the bar was reviewed. The detectives saw Jenna sitting alone at the bar, drinking a cocktail and sending messages. Around 1:30 a.m., a man approached her, started a conversation, and then bought her a drink. They sat together for about 20 minutes before leaving the bar just before it closed. They both appeared to be quite intoxicated as they were walking unsteadily. When the bartender was shown the footage and asked if he knew the man, he immediately recognized a regular customer and even named him Joshua Hupperters. According to the bartender, Joshua was almost a daily visitor, and the night before he seemed particularly interested in the lonely beauty, buying her cocktails and persistently inviting her to his place. The authorities discovered that Joshua had recently turned 29, had once attended Temple University but never graduated, having taken an extended academic leave. Despite this, he constantly hung out with students and lived just 5 minutes away from the bar where he was seen with Jenna. He rented a spacious apartment in a building across the street, which he shared with his friend, Jack Miley. It wasn't until later in the evening that they managed to reach Joshua, who claimed he had been very drunk the night before and didn't remember anything about a girl from the bar. He agreed to come in for questioning, but soon after, his phone was turned off, prompting the police to visit Hupperters' apartment themselves. The main suspect. Only Jack was home, and he let the detectives in without any fuss. The guy's apartment looked like a typical bachelor pad, with disorder reigning in nearly every room. Jack admitted that he and his friend had indeed gone to the sports bar the night before, where they drank heavily. Afterward, Joshua picked up some girl, and Jack decided to head home to give them privacy. Jack claimed he went straight to bed and didn't hear when his roommate came home or if he was alone. The next day, Joshua suddenly started cleaning the kitchen. He seemed worried, had fresh scratches on his face, and a deep cut on his hand. Joshua explained this as an unfortunate accident, saying he had fallen into some bushes while drunk. After lunch, he disappeared, taking some of his belongings with him, without telling his friend where he was going or how long he'd be gone, and his phone was turned off. The large apartment the guys lived in had a second exit leading to the backyard, where there were no surveillance cameras. Near the door, a pair of men's sandals with strange brownish stains were found, and on a dresser lay a roll of paper towels stained with something that looked like blood. There was also a strong smell of cleaning chemicals in the kitchen, and several empty bottles of cleaning products were scattered on the floor. All of this raised alarming suspicions, and from that point on, Joshua was considered the main suspect in the case of the missing student. The police decided to dig deeper into Hupperters' background and discovered that he was born and raised in Philadelphia, lost his father at an early age, who had been violently deprived of life, and this event had been traumatic for the child. Joshua enrolled at Temple University but never graduated, remaining a student until he was 29. He had a history of legal issues related to the distribution of prohibited substances which he sold to students. Additionally, he had served several months for burglary and had been charged multiple times for assaults on women in attempts to coerce them into intimacy. The search and first interrogation of the fugitive. It became clear that the suspect could be extremely dangerous, and there was still no information about the fate of the missing girl. The FBI joined the investigation, and soon it was determined that Joshua's phone had last been active in Wayne County, about 230 miles north of Philadelphia, near a lake. It was discovered that the fugitive's grandmother lived in that area, and he might be hiding at her house. Hupperters was indeed apprehended at his maternal grandmother's house. He appeared calm and didn't resist. He maintained that he didn't remember anything about the night of August 31st because he was drunk, and when asked about the fresh wounds on his body, he repeated the same story about falling into bushes that he had told his roommate Jack. He explained his sudden departure as wanting to spend the last weekend before the start of classes with family. When the police pointed out that they knew he wasn't enrolled in any university, he fell silent and demanded a lawyer. Meanwhile, experts working at the fugitive's apartment in Philadelphia found traces of blood on the floor, plumbing, and in the trash can. They were waiting for the test results to determine whose blood it was, and the hope of finding the missing girl alive was fading with each passing minute. During the search of Joshua's room, several bags of various prohibited substances were found, along with about $20,000 in cash. The mysterious container. Detectives continued to search Hupperter's residence, including the backyard accessible through the second door. In the corner trash bins, which fortunately had not yet been emptied, a black bag was found containing a light blue hoodie and a t-shirt with slogans, along with a sports bra and a black hair tie with a few dark strands of hair. The clothing found in the trash closely resembled what Jenna was wearing on the day she disappeared. To make matters worse, there were bloodstains on the items, making the chances of finding the girl alive seem almost non-existent. Nevertheless, the search continued, and the suspect remained silent. On September 2nd, Hupperter's stepfather unexpectedly called the police, reporting that on August 31st, the man had visited his mother's house in Jenkintown. He had arrived by taxi, carrying a large, opaque plastic container that was very heavy. Joshua explained that it contained his books and some personal belongings. He left the container in the garage and left early the next morning, taking another taxi. The stepfather found this suspicious, as the container was unusually heavy and gave off a strange feeling. Knowing his stepson's criminal past, the elderly man decided to inform the police without telling his wife. He didn't know where Joshua went afterward, but heard him asking the driver not to log the trip in the app, promising to pay in cash. The grisly discovery in the shed. By the time the stepfather called, Hupperter's had already been apprehended, and a search of his grandmother's house had yielded no suspicious findings. The fate of the mysterious plastic container remained unknown, and the authorities suspected it might have been sunk in a lake. They considered involving divers in the search, but the case took an unexpected turn. It turned out that Joshua's grandmother's husband had a small shed located a significant distance from the house, nearly hidden by overgrown bushes and trees. The man stored an old boat and fishing gear there, though he hadn't used them in a long time. On September 3rd, he decided to check the shed and noticed the lock on the door was broken. Suspecting thieves, he entered but found everything in its place, except for a strange container that hadn't been there before. He opened the container and recoiled in horror. Inside was the severely mutilated naked body of a young woman. He immediately called the police to report the gruesome discovery. The authorities quickly realized whose remains the pensioner had found in his shed and called in Burley's parents for identification. Jenna's mother fainted, and her father nearly had a heart attack when their worst fears were confirmed. The crime scene. Through witness testimony and surveillance footage, investigators established that Hupperter's had plied the already intoxicated girl with more alcohol and then lured her to his home. When Jenna realized she was trapped, she managed to send several friends messages asking for help, but none responded. At the apartment, Joshua attacked the girl and tried to force her into intimacy, but she fought back fiercely, scratching the criminal and cutting his hand with a kitchen knife. However, he managed to knock the knife out of her hand and repeatedly slammed her head against the floor. He incapacitated Jenna and took advantage of her before strangling the poor girl with his bare hands. He then placed her body in a container he found in the storage room and cleaned up the crime scene as best he could. The autopsy revealed that Jenna died from mechanical asphyxiation. Her body showed numerous abrasions, bruises, and even bite marks. She also had a traumatic brain injury and signs of intimate assault. The blood found on the shoes and paper towels in the apartment was hers, her hair was on the hair tie in the trash can, and the blood and semen found on her clothing matched the defendant's. The trial and sentencing. Hupperters refused to take a plea deal or admit guilt, even though his culpability was never in doubt. Furthermore, a search of his grandmother's house revealed a backpack containing his documents, cash, and a few essentials, indicating that the criminal had intended to flee and was caught just in time. The trial of the criminal and assailant began only in the spring of 2019, a year and a half after the horrific crime. The defense attorneys desperately tried to shift all the blame onto the deceased girl, claiming that she had voluntarily come to Joshua's apartment and provoked him. However, the defense's statements sparked outrage among everyone present. After 9 days of hearings, the defendant was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole only after 60 years. Our story today is about a strong woman who broke down in an instant and made a life-changing decision that fundamentally changed the lives of her entire family. This story will remind everyone how important it is to take your mental health and the mental health of your loved ones seriously, and not to be afraid to speak up when things in life don't go the way you want them to. We will visit Atlanta, the capital and most populous city in the state of Georgia. It's a vibrant, busy tourist city that has grown thanks to giants like Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines. On November 6, 2021, at around 9 p.m., a man called emergency services to report that exhaustive screams and several gunshots were heard coming from a neighbor's house. Police officers rushed to the scene and entered the home. They found a man and a woman dead on the floor. After examining the scene of the tragedy, the police began their investigation. The murdered spouses were Ronell and Kiana Burns. But who would want to kill a married couple and why? The family lived in a large home that was located in the most ethnically diverse county in Gwinnett County. The house itself did not appear to have been burglarized, as all belongings were still in their places. But the clue to this double crime came to light very quickly. Let's rewind with you the history of the Burns family, like a movie backwards, and see the true cause of the tragedy that occurred. Kiana was born on September 15, 1977 in St. Louis, Missouri. She graduated from Riverview Gardens High School, later at St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley, where she majored in cosmetology and soon began building her own business career. Kiana opened her own beauty salon, which was popular. The girl was very hardworking, as she always dreamed of a luxurious and rich life. She invested a lot of time in the business, and it paid off. Over the next 20 years, with her persistence and hard work, Kiana turned it into one of the largest beauty salons throughout the St. Louis area. However, the personal life of a young, bright woman did not always go smoothly. Strong, wealthy, and ambitious Kiana was very difficult to find a worthy couple. In her 44 years, she had 3 children from previous relationships, whom Kiana loved with all her soul. Her family described her as a great and loving mother. She knew how to support women, was a good friend, and a successful businesswoman. Kiana had it all when she met her future husband, Ronell Burns. Ronell Burns was born on May 14, 1975, in St. Louis, Missouri. Ronell graduated from the High School of Fashion in 1994. He played on the basketball team and played for a state championship. He was very driven, ambitious, especially loved the competitive spirit and always strived for greatness. When he met Kiana, he had 2 children of his own from a previous relationship. So fate brought 2 successful and ambitious people together, and they created a new, strong, and happy family. On September 13, 2012, they officially became husband and wife and celebrated a gorgeous wedding in the presence of numerous relatives and friends. However, soon after the wedding for Kiana began to open new sides of her chosen one. It turned out that at an early age, Ronell dedicated his life to Jesus Christ and wanted to start doing the work of the Lord. He began to serve everyone he could, even those he crossed paths with on the street. Ronell created his own webpage on the internet where he began coaching and preaching. Ronell voiced that in his early years, God spoke to him and told him to help people. One of the calls stated, Sometimes he can call everyone, and only he can allow things to happen in life. Ronell continued his ministry. His video messages were very popular on the internet. In addition to his impressive lines as a church coach, Ronell was a financial counselor and insurance agent. He started a company called Traditional Financial Solutions, where he was determined to help people all over the world become financially independent. Ronell was very successful in his business and in his efforts to help, and his speeches did draw large audiences. Kiana supported her husband. Together they gained popularity online, as Ronell was already quite well known as a leader and coach in Six Figure Ambition, an online program for entrepreneurs. He had over 7,000 followers on Instagram and 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, where he ran a channel with educational videos. Ronell and Kiana Burns brought their families and business minds together. They dreamed together and ended up creating something great that touched thousands of people. Kiana was known as a speaker at business events where she shared lessons and inspiration on how to succeed. She also had 14,000 followers on Instagram where she shared thoughts on her family life and inspirational quotes. In one of the popular video messages, the beautiful couple dressed exclusively in branded items appeared before their audience. They talked about entrepreneurship and how it has benefited their lives and the lives of thousands of subscribers. The couple spoke loudly that their mission is to convey to their audience how to become successful entrepreneurs, as well as build their fundamental business. The time to build other people's businesses was over. The Burns family wanted to teach young entrepreneurs not to spend all the money they earned, but to invest it skillfully to generate new money that earned itself. The speech ended with the message that the Burnses believe in everyone who believes in them. And the belief is that you don't have to be great to start. You have to start to become great. They have never hidden their luxurious life, instead flaunting it in front of their audience, attracting new students and subscribers. However, in the Burns family, only Kiana has traveled the path that Ronell has repeatedly described. She has worked hard to build and operate an entire network of salons on her own. At the time of their coaching, Kiana owned several salons and was also a successful insurance agent. It was Kiana's business that brought in most of the family's capital. Ronell, in turn, diligently wanted to occupy a winning position, and therefore there was an image of a wealthy family exclusively in expensive clothes. Photos from the best restaurants were published daily. But rich and successful people go ahead, not wasting time on words, and poor people continued to believe the speeches of the Burns family. By tempting stories of how to earn big money without labor, using only the words of his mentor Ronell, he received a lot of interest from the outside, because every poor person dreams of becoming rich. So Ronell Burns founded a company with six-figure ambitions. It gave them the opportunity to continue to add to their capital and create their own legacy, which he talked about in every interview. The Burnses created a tight-knit family, and for a long time, their entire entourage thought so. Until Ronell suggested that Kiana move from her beloved and native St. Louis to Atlanta. By that time, they already had 3 children together, Rhea, Makey, and Ray Haley. Parents to their children, and well-known in their careers, Ronell and Kiana Burns were inspirational figures that people looked up to. The move to Atlanta was a forced move. They had plans to expand their business. Having owned his wife's business, Ronell dreamed of expanding it. 3 beauty salons in St. Louis was no longer enough for him. The ambitious Ronell wanted to establish a chain of salons in Atlanta, as well to expand his clientele. Kiana was reluctant to move out of St. Louis, but again gave in to her husband and continued to play along with him in front of the public. Kiana Burns painted a rosy picture of her life. On social media, she posted a picture of her receiving a premium Maserati Levant car as a gift from her husband. She also shared photos of her trunk full of Louis Vuitton bags. Each such post was captioned with words of admiration and gratitude to her husband. But, like any blogger, Kiana often dedicated her Instagram feed to her beloved children and family. After a while, the woman couldn't stand it and admitted to her audience that everything in their family is not as smooth as it looks. It turned out that the couple was on the verge of divorce. After moving to Atlanta, Kiana was left alone in a big, unfamiliar city where she had to start all over again. In a video message, she shared with her subscribers that it was hard for her to decide to move and adjust to a new home and new people. "You have to be ready for life changes," she said during her Facebook live stream. "Things in your life can change for the better or for the worse overnight. Literally. If you don't think you're a strong enough person, some things can take you out of yourself." She told her followers that she needed their support as she was going through a difficult time. Kiana admitted that her favorite subscribers are helping her get through the dark days, which had become quite a lot lately. From the outside, no one knew that they were so close to divorcing each other. This confession disturbed the subscribers, and Ronell had to speak out live on air, too. He revealed that they decided 7 months ago that they were going to get a divorce. His words sounded like a business plan again. "I'm tired of her. We're going to continue to run our business together going forward, but we're also announcing that we're going to divorce. We've dealt with each other. We've both come to this conclusion, but let's not put pressure and grieve. Everything around us will remain the same. We took out a piece of paper on which we drew a line down the middle. That's how we decided how we're going to divide the business. But for obvious reasons, bloggers share only positive stories with their followers. To tell about failures and failures is to lose faith and, in the case of the Burns family, their status, which has been built up over the years. However, being public figures, it soon did become clear that the family's wealthy life was just a picture for social media. Ronell, in his hunt for fame and popularity, very quickly squandered all the money Kiana received from beauty salons. But he did not stop there, and the debt of the Burns family to various banks in a few years reached more than $500,000. Obviously, the move to an unfamiliar city and financial difficulties reached their peak. On the eve of the tragedy, Kiana Burns went live and interacted with her subscribers. She went live where she asked her fans to pray for her strength as she struggles without the support and help of family and friends, especially as she cares for her children. In the post, Kiana talked about life changes and shared how she and her husband moved to Atlanta to expand their business just 5 or 6 months ago. She wrote, "I tell you that if you don't pray and keep the faith, things can change and take you away." She also spoke of the existence of a supportive love circle that will help you and talk to you about things that you just can't seem to get past. Because if we leave things to chance, we start to think to ourselves and make bad decisions. At the end of her speech, she added that any change in life is not always smooth sailing. Learning about new environments and new people, especially without the support of immediate family and friends, is sometimes very difficult. The woman also admitted that she is working with her mental health and worries that she is not strong enough to take on the challenges of fate. But was the move the main reason for the imbalance in the family? In that speech, Kiana was silent that the real cause of the rift was Ronell's numerous cheating and promiscuous life, which always remained behind the scenes of their happy life on Instagram. However, on the same night, she posted a video again where she was dancing merrily at home with one of her daughters. A few hours later, the unthinkable happened. Kiana and Ronell had a long argument. She then grabbed a gun and shot him, then herself. Authorities were first called to the Burns home. By the time police arrived, neighbors had gathered outside and said they heard gunshots coming from inside. Preliminary stages of the investigation determined that Ronell Burns had shot himself. But soon discovering Kiana's bloody body in the next room with a gun in her hands, it became apparent that the decision had come from a woman. The motive was clear, but some people claimed that Kiana was forced to kill her husband after she discovered he was cheating on her. Another version said that the couple was in terrible debt and that Ronell turned out to be a common con man who ended up cheating on her. People who believed this family dug hard into their lives in search of the truth. They discovered some very compromising information from Ronell's ex-wife. She claimed that during her divorce proceedings, she had learned that Ronell was a habitual chronic cheater. During that time period, he was extremely irresponsible with his wife's money and also failed to hold down any jobs, which ultimately led to ruin and a ruined credit history for his now ex-wife. Then he met Keanu. She was actually of great interest to Ronell, as she was a successful career woman. She in turn was attracted to Ronell's confidence and swagger. Keanu's fortune and Ronell's experience seemed to be a winning combination, but these expectations were not met, and all their business endeavors eventually collapsed. Only Keanu's beauty salon remained afloat, and from that moment on, despite the lack of income from Ronell, he actively continued to convince everyone what a successful businessman he was. The family successfully hid the real state of affairs and their severe lack of money on social media, continuously showing off expensive purchases. They also carefully hid the problems in their relationship behind happy photos together. On his account, Ronell continued to publish posts about his business endeavors, where he claimed that everything he takes on becomes successful and profitable. The Burns couple showed themselves to be devout Christians, and in each post, they added quotes from the Bible and other holy scriptures that fit the meaning of the speech. The couple also posted photos of their luxurious residence, showing the public their wealth and family in great detail. However, all these photos, which they showed in their home or at a party in front of cars or on vacation, in reality were only a cover and show. Ronell worked for an American marketing insurance company that extorted money from middle and lower income families. In fact, the man tried to involve even his family members and friends in this fraudulent scheme in order to raise his status, but Ronell did not get enough money from this activity in the firm and could not support himself. They kept convincing everyone around them that the new business was successful and they themselves were successful entrepreneurs. Their arrogance was so strong that they even made a TV series about themselves, calling it Meet the Burns. Everything they supposedly earned was immediately spent on a lavish lifestyle and a desire to feel like someone they really weren't. Such profligacy eventually led them to bankruptcy. So on December 19, 2019, Keanu and Ronell Burns filed an official bankruptcy petition. The couple had to liquidate some of their assets to pay off their creditors. While this was going on in their lives, Ronell and Keanu still continued to pretend like nothing was going on. They continued to portray themselves as a happy family and successful businessmen. But in St. Louis, it was getting harder and harder to do that. So Ronell decided that their family should move to a bigger city so that he could continue to scam more people with impunity. This became another stupid and failed decision on his part. They still had a thriving business that was the family's only source of income. Unfortunately, Keanu once again went along with her husband and agreed to the move. Keanu couldn't get used to Atlanta. She already knew that her husband had cheated on her repeatedly. The woman was tired of being patient and silent. Together, they made the decision to divorce. But in papers filed on October 10, 2021, Ronell listed his wife's infidelity as the reason for the divorce. Keanu was destroyed, but she understood the reasons as family and friends had no idea of the couple's difficulties. Ronell hid the truth from the public in hopes of preserving his image. On October 20th, 10 days after Ronell filed for divorce, Keanu went on live TV that day to talk about something much more serious. The bright smile she often displayed was now replaced by an expression of concern and sadness. After divorcing his first wife, conman Ronell Burns had remarried the successful and wealthy Keanu, and using his new image as a devout guru, he seemed a changed and reliable man. But in reality, he hadn't changed and continued to take advantage of his new wife's trust and money by playing the successful businessman. What seemed like a perfect union was over. On November 9, 2021, 44-year-old Keanu Burns shot and killed her husband, 46-year-old Ronell Burns, before pointing the gun at herself and committing suicide. The Sandy Springs Police Department said no one was home at the time of the murder, but the couple left behind 8 children who will now grow up without parents. Police said there was no history of domestic violence at the family's Atlanta home. Kiana Burns committed this a few weeks after asking her Facebook friends to pray for her. The reasons for this decision by Kiana Burns are unknown. One can only speculate what prompted the strong-spirited woman to make such a drastic decision. It is obvious that at that time she saw only such a way out while in a difficult condition. She withdrew into herself through unsolvable inner problems. She was tired of appearing to be happy instead of being happy. All their life together, they had portrayed that they were happy. However, everything in this family was a farce and a game. Absolutely everything. Kiana was tired of lying. It's hard to judge what a person does under a cloud of depression and other debilitating mental disorders, but it's also hard to understand why so many children are left alone in this world, essentially to fend for themselves. News of the influential couple's death has traveled throughout their vast network of friends and colleagues. The death of Ronell Burns and his wife Kiana has been widely publicized on social media. Numerous followers and friends shared words of regret describing the couple. People close to the couple paid tribute. One post written by a family friend shows that even people very close to the couple didn't know the real truth about the family until the end. Ronell Burns was someone who felt the need to flaunt his success and luxury, and these are usually the most insecure people. He got so caught up in his own self-belief that he mistook his sense of self-worth for a sense of self-importance. Imitating a stormy activity, he was able to ruin the life of more than one diligent and successful woman. Such people have no pride and no sense of dignity. He's just an ordinary con man who dragged his wives to the bottom. But where does a man like him get his pride? He deceived women, making them believe in beautiful fairy tales of happiness and success that awaits them only with him, because it is known that women love with their ears and dream of eternal love. And subscribers, will you say? Who tells subscribers the whole truth? They are strangers for whom they always create a beautiful picture. But do not forget that a beautiful picture, which is depicted on the front side of the paper, always has a backside, and what it will be decide only you. The dark mystery of the disappearance is solved 14 years later. Investigating certain crimes can take years or even decades due to a lack of evidence or witnesses. Sometimes investigations are intentionally misled to create confusion or send investigators down the wrong path. Many such cases eventually end up on the shelves of archives as unresolved. However, crimes involving life-ending actions and abuses of various degrees of severity generally have no statute of limitations, and investigations can be reopened at any time when new information surfaces. Cases related to the disappearance of individuals, particularly minors, are often solved on hot tracks. It is believed that the first 3 days are critical when there is a high likelihood of finding the person alive. Thereafter, the chances of a favorable outcome rapidly diminish. The case of the missing German schoolgirl from Berlin, Georgina Krueger, was investigated for over 10 years and was considered one of the most mysterious in the history of German criminology. The girl disappeared during the day on her way home from school, having traveled just a few dozen meters from her home. No evidence, leads, or witnesses were found, and although the investigation was periodically reopened, there was little hope of solving the crime. However, thanks to meticulous work by undercover agents, the criminal was eventually exposed. What is known about Georgina Krueger and her family? Georgina, or simply Gina Krueger, was born on April 11, 1992, in Munich, and was the middle child of 3 in a simple family. She grew up with her older brother Tommy, who was 8 years her senior, and her younger sister Michelle, who was 2.5 years her junior. When Gina turned 11, her parents decided to separate, and her older brother, who was then 19, chose to live with their father. After the divorce, the girls were primarily raised by their mother Vesma and their grandmother on their mother's side. Both girls did well in school, were involved in music and dance, and were creative by nature. The family lived modestly, and while their father maintained contact with his ex-wife and daughters, he was more focused on supporting his elder son, whom he funded through school and supported in various ways. In June 2006, Vesna moved with her mother and daughters to Berlin, where she had been offered a well-paying job. The family settled in the Moabit district at house number 8 on Stendhal Street. On September 1st, the sisters attended one of the best local schools, which, although located in a different district, was accessible by bus. Vesna was very pleased with her new job and had big plans for the future, but soon the peaceful and measured life of the family was shattered. She dreamed of becoming an actress. From childhood, Gina loved to sing and dance, engaging in these activities seriously and with full dedication. Inspired by Indian films, she dreamed of an acting career and enthusiastically participated in school theater, as well as attending acting and stage speech courses. Teachers working with young Krueger noted that she definitely possessed the necessary talents, and thus predicted her future success and fame. Moreover, the girl had a bright, expressive appearance, a slender feminine figure, and was quite tall for her age. She took meticulous care of herself, keeping up with fashion trends, striving to dress stylishly, and used decorative cosmetics skillfully and intelligently. It's worth noting that Georgina applied makeup as well as professional makeup artists, often doing makeup for her friends and neighbors back in Munich. In Berlin, during the summer holidays, she actively attended various castings, trying to break into the big screen or television. She managed to appear in crowd scenes a few times, but these were very inconspicuous episodes. However, on Friday, September 22nd, 2006, luck finally smiled at her. She auditioned for a guest role in the television series, Turkish for Beginners, and her candidacy was approved. Gina was supposed to receive a call back on Monday, September 25th, to finalize her inclusion in the cast, discuss details, and invite her to sign a contract. The new beauty in town. In her new school, the young beauty caused a real stir from the first day, capturing the attention of all the boys in her class. However, she struggled to get along with the girls as they openly envied her and saw her as a competitor. Her classmates were slow to accept her into their group and communicated with her reluctantly, although Gina was sociable, friendly, and open, avoided conflicts, and tried to interact with all the kids in the class. The teenage girl was indeed very beautiful, danced well, sang, and even received an offer from a modeling agency to try herself as a photo model. She agreed, but unfortunately, she never made it to the planned photo session in early October. Gina dreamed that one day she would make it to Hollywood or Bollywood, where she would act in movies. She imagined herself on the red carpets of prestigious film festivals, among celebrities, dreaming of fame, recognition, film awards, and was ready to work hard on herself to achieve her desires. The schoolgirl almost made it happen, when suddenly she disappeared without a trace, a few miles from home. So the schoolgirl was awaiting confirmation of her role in the TV series, and she had no doubts about it. All weekend, Georgina could think of nothing else but the upcoming call from the studio, which was set to decide her fate. She was excited and inspired, already imagining herself on set and working on her lines. On Monday, September 25th, as usual, she headed to school in the morning. She was supposed to return home by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and since the call was expected in the late afternoon, Gina asked her grandmother to answer all calls, promising not to linger anywhere. The day dragged on endlessly for Krueger. Her classmates noticed that she seemed tense, constantly checking the time, and unable to focus on her lessons. Since she hadn't told anyone about her participation in the casting, her anxious state was interpreted differently by everyone. When school ended, Georgina, having gathered her belongings, hurried to the nearest bus stop, got on bus number 27, which she rode daily, and headed home. After traveling 3 stops, she got off at Rue Rettenover, which was a short distance from her house. However, she never made it home, vanishing somewhere halfway from the stop to her apartment. Georgina Krueger was never seen again, neither alive nor deceased. Search for the missing schoolgirl. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the grandmother, who was waiting for the granddaughters to return from school, had prepared lunch and set the table. Georgina was supposed to return first, and Michelle a bit later, since she had additional classes at the music school that day. But the older granddaughter did not show up, which was very strange because she was eagerly awaiting the call and had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3 o'clock, the grandmother grew anxious and started calling Gina to find out where she had vanished, but the schoolgirl's phone was turned off. Subsequent attempts to reach her also failed. The anxiety grew, and when Vesna returned from work and learned that her daughter was missing and her mobile was unreachable, she realized something serious had happened. The first thing the mother did was call the school, where she was informed that Krueger had attended all her classes and had left by bus as usual. Then the woman contacted several of her daughter's friends, hoping that the girls had simply got caught up talking or had stopped at the cafe on their way home, but they said that Georgina was in a hurry and had headed straight home. The concerned women then went to the police station and reported the disappearance of the 14-year-old girl. However, the law enforcement initially took a skeptical view, suspecting that the schoolgirl might have gone on a date, visited someone among friends, or had an argument with a classmate and was sulking alone somewhere in a park. After exhausting all possible scenarios and verifying that the teenager was nowhere to be found in any of the anticipated locations, detectives began checking reports of accidents and calling hospitals, assuming that the girl might have encountered trouble, suffered an injury, or been harmed on her way home from school. But Gina had not been admitted to any hospital either. As the night approached, extensive searches and witness interviews began. It turned out that the girl was last seen at the bus stop when she exited the bus and turned onto the street leading to her home. The schoolgirl was dressed in blue jeans with wear marks, a light blue t-shirt, a denim jacket, and gray sneakers. She carried a pink sports bag with a long, wide strap, which contained her notebooks, textbooks, and her mobile phone. Investigators were able to track the girl's movements through her device's signal. She indeed spent the entire day at school, then boarded the bus and got off at her stop. But approximately halfway to her home, the signal suddenly disappeared and never reappeared. The search began on Stendhal Street, where the Krueger family lived. A search team with dogs trained to detect the scent of living or deceased humans was dispatched there. At that point, there was still hope of finding the teenage girl alive and unharmed. Vanished into thin air. Law enforcement checked every home, interviewed all residents and potential witnesses, inspected attics and basements, spoke with workers at local stores and cafes, but no one had seen Georgina, and even dogs could not pick up her trail. By the next morning, flyers with the schoolgirl's photos and requests for any information about her had been posted all over the city. Dozens of calls came into the police station reporting sightings of a similar-looking girl in different parts of the city, but unfortunately, all leads turned out to be false. Concurrently, investigators began to follow up on all previously convicted local residents, as well as those who had been released on bail. Special attention was given to criminals and those who had shown an unhealthy interest in minors. However, all these efforts yielded no results. The schoolgirl seemed to have vanished into thin air, not making it home. No traces or personal belongings were found, as if she had never existed at all. False lead. After several months of fruitless searching, the investigation was suspended as there were no leads, not a single clue, and no idea which direction to pursue. However, about a year after Georgina's disappearance, an anonymous call came into the police station, with the unknown caller claiming that the girl's body rested at the bottom of a nearby lake. Authorities were unable to identify the caller, but they clung to this piece of information and decided to investigate it. For several weeks, highly skilled divers combed the lake bed using advanced equipment. It can be said with certainty that they examined virtually every inch, but found no trace of Krueger. The lead turned out to be false, but it nevertheless rekindled public interest in the case. The media actively discussed and wrote about the missing girl again, so it was decided to conduct another search operation. The police re-interviewed neighbors and brought in search dogs, although it was clear that this would likely yield no results. The dogs had been unable to pick up the girl's scent on the day of her disappearance, so there was little hope for success after a whole year. Investigators were confident that the schoolgirl was no longer alive, but the Krueger family members refused to believe this. Vesna concocted a legend for herself, according to which her daughter had run away to India and was now starring in Bollywood films, dancing and singing as she had always dreamed. The woman consoled herself with these thoughts and continued to live for the sake of her younger daughter. The monster next door. Search efforts periodically resumed, and in 2016, nearly a decade after a girl's disappearance, a resident of Stendhal Street contacted the police to complain about a neighbor who was actively inviting underage girls over to his place. This neighbor turned out to be a 35-year-old immigrant from Turkey named Ali K. He was legally married, raising 3 children, and tried to appear as an exemplary family man to those around him, but in reality, he was not. Upon closer inspection of Ali, and after studying his personality, the police were horrified, as 4 years prior, he had already been under investigation. At that time, he deceitfully lured a local schoolgirl, promising to sell her a trendy smartphone at a symbolic price. He took the girl to his storeroom, located in the basement of the apartment building, struck her on the head, and coerced her into intimate closeness. Afterward, he made the teenager swear she wouldn't tell anyone about what happened, then gave her a paper napkin to wipe her tears, and helped her tidy up before leaving. The girl promised to remain silent just to escape from the clutches of the monster, but as soon as she was free, she immediately told her parents about the incident, and together they went to the police to report the violent actions. The schoolgirl detailed the man's storeroom in the basement, noting that it looked more like a maniac's den. Ali was arrested the same day, but he vehemently denied his guilt and shared his own version of the events. According to him, he was indeed selling the gadget, and the girl herself expressed a desire to buy it. As the smartphone was in his basement storeroom, they went down together, and when the guest examined the device, she said that she had always dreamed of such a gadget, but since she didn't have the money, she was ready to pay in another way. Following this, according to Ali, the girl began kissing him and started undressing, and he, trying to reason with her, pushed her away forcefully, causing her to fall and hit her head. This explained the injury and bruises on her body, but the fact of intimate closeness could not be proven as the man had used a contraceptive, which he later disposed of. Ali's wife, Melek, fully supported her husband and also began accusing the girl of indecent behavior and attempts to seduce her husband. Ultimately, the man only received a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. Nonetheless, now as the police took up the investigation of the disappearance of Krueger again, they decided to check him thoroughly once more. Ali K did not have a permanent job and got by on odd jobs, mainly living on benefits. He loved gambling and often incurred debts, was a regular visitor to the Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building, where he made acquaintances with different people who treated him to food and drinks. The man carefully maintained his appearance, desperately trying to look younger than his years. He wore fashionable clothes, sometimes even spending children's benefits on them. But the main oddity about this man was his attraction to girls. He continually tried to meet teenagers, ask them inappropriate questions, and also offered strange and illegal things, for instance, help with buying alcohol or cigarettes. Ali most resembled the role of Georgina's abductor, but the police had nothing against him in this case. New investigation. Nevertheless, the Krueger case was reopened, and a new investigation was initiated due to the emergence of a new suspect. Ali K was brought to the station and questioned, but he naturally denied any involvement in the decade-old case. His storage room in the basement was inspected, but no traces of the missing schoolgirl were found. Detectives noted that this space indeed seemed more like a meeting place than a storage area. It turned out that 10 years ago, he had been questioned along with other neighbors, and his basement had been inspected. But specifically, Ali's storage room had not been checked because, firstly, there was no reason to, and secondly, according to residents, the door always had a lock, so only the owner could access it. Ali himself had been an active participant in the search operation at that time and was one of its most engaged members. Despite the fact that the police had nothing concrete to charge K with, they decided to keep him under surveillance to learn as much as possible about him. Unofficial monitoring was organized, and all his phone calls were intercepted. Soon this provided initial results, and detectives discovered that the man had significant debts unknown to his wife. He had lost about 10,000 euros in poker and had no idea how to get out of this predicament. The investigation decided to focus on this aspect. Undercover agents. The decision was made to introduce an undercover agent into the suspect's close circle, who was expected to gain his trust, extract the necessary information, and secure an on-record confession. However, everything had to be done slowly and carefully so the suspect wouldn't become suspicious and would feel secure. For this purpose, a special agent codenamed Hakan was prepared and sent in, posing as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Moabit area to open a car service station. A couple of times he visited the cafe in Ali's building, where he loudly discussed business plans and details with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned that they needed to find a manager soon, noting that it was a well-paying position and it was important to choose wisely. After these words, the second man left, and Haken stayed to finish his coffee, when suddenly Ali approached and sat at his table. He took the bait and immediately offered himself for the manager position. A conversation ensued, which quickly turned into a casual chat, and the businessman noted that Ali might fit the role, then mentioned the salary. Ali's eyes lit up at the figure. He began dreaming of paying off his debts and buying the sports car he had always wanted. The men exchanged phone numbers, and from that day on, they began to communicate regularly, and their relationship quickly grew into a friendship. Hakan even started taking Ali on business trips to other cities, aiming to get closer to him and gain his trust. But this friendship had the opposite effect, as the suspect strived to appear as the best version of himself to his prospective employer. He boasted of his achievements, even the most minor ones, and preferred to keep silent about any wrongful acts. Several months later, realizing that the case was not progressing, the investigation decided to introduce another agent, this time a woman who would play Hakam's girlfriend. This introduced Susan into the story, whose goal was to befriend Ali's wife, Malek, and try to uncover any secrets the husband might be keeping. It only took a few meetings for them to get along, after which all four started socializing as families. Malek was a sociable woman, but regarded her husband as nearly a saint. For years she had turned a blind eye to his infidelities, did not believe the schoolgirl who accused him of violence, and was convinced that her husband was a very good person, just unlucky with jobs. But now everything would change. Soon, Susan realized that Ali's wife wasn't just covering for him. She truly believed that he was simply incapable of harming anyone. The agents even decided to use a trick by spreading a rumor that there was progress in the Krueger case and an unnamed source had indicated where to find her body. Hakan left a newspaper with this article in his car, which Ali had started borrowing occasionally. Several cameras and recording devices were also installed in this car. When the suspect and his wife got into the car, she soon noticed the newspaper left behind, quickly skimmed the article, showed a bit of surprise that the case was still being investigated, and then indifferently put the paper aside. It became clear that Malek knew nothing about this. Otherwise, she would have inadvertently revealed herself. Good cop, bad cop. 6 months later, the investigation finally concluded that their plan had failed. The K family had become friends with the agents, even trusting them to look after their children, but no confessions were forthcoming. Ali strived to appear honest and upright, and his wife was simply unaware of the crime her husband had committed. Moreover, maintaining their cover was becoming increasingly expensive. They even had to lease a space for the supposed auto repair shop and signed a sham employment contract with the man to avoid raising his suspicions. The investigation then took a desperate last step by introducing another agent who would play a villainous role. According to the backstory, his name was Kor. He was Hakan's cousin, had a criminal record, and was running some underground business. It was hoped that Ali, meeting a kindred spirit, would open up and confess his sins. The men quickly bonded over their shared interests. Kor treated his new friend to drinks, and together they visited various clubs and houses of ill repute. The new friend confessed that he made money through not entirely legal means, and thus wanted to spend it indulgently, with Ali willingly helping him in this. Simultaneously, Kor constantly complained about his girlfriend, with whom he supposedly could not break up because she was blackmailing him and threatening to report his illegal business to the police. According to him, she constantly demanded money, and her appetites were growing. One day, while having drinks with his friend, Kor declared that he intended to rid himself of the bothersome blackmailing girlfriend in a radical way and was willing to pay a sum of 100,000 euros to anyone who would do the dirty work. Ali perked up at this and offered to take on the task himself. His friend agreed, but suggested they discuss the details in a secluded place when sober. Monstrous confession. In November 2017, sitting in the agent's car, the men discussed the plan to eliminate his nuisance girlfriend. At one point, Kor doubted whether Ali was capable of taking a life. In response, Ali revealed something he claimed no one else knew. He confessed that more than 11 years ago, he had taken a life of someone with his bare hands. Ali said that in 2006, a stunning young girl had moved onto his street, who completely captivated him. She passed by his house twice a day on her way to and from school, so he had memorized her schedule and would step out to greet her and pay compliments. Despite her young age, he described her as hot, and he burned with desire for her. One warm September day, when the girl was returning from school and the street was unusually quiet and deserted, Ali saw his chance. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move some items from his storage area, and she kindly agreed, not sensing any danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and tried to kiss the schoolgirl, who struggled and screamed. He then knocked her unconscious with a blow to the head and took advantage of her. After the incident, afraid she might report him to the police, he decided not to let her go. He grabbed her throat with his hands and squeezed as hard as he could. Ali described the process in detail, explaining how he felt the crunch and sensed the pulse in her neck fade away. The girl's body lay in the basement for several days, so if the search team had looked into his storage area, they would have immediately uncovered the perpetrator. But no one suspected anything, and once the commotion had died down, he wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin, which went directly to the landfill. Ali's confessions were recorded on a camera installed in Kaur's car, and by the evening of that same day, he was taken into custody. Unfortunately, the girl's remains were never found, as the waste of the landfill was regularly incinerated, and her body was essentially cremated. The trial and verdict. The hearings in this case lasted another 2.5 years before a final verdict was delivered to the criminal. He adamantly denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he had fabricated the entire story to gain Kaur's trust. But in reality, he planned to rescue his girlfriend by turning in his friend to the police as soon as he received the money. No other evidence was found besides the criminal's own confession. However, his detailed and vivid account was enough to convince the jury of this man's guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Georgina's disappearance, Ali K was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of ever being released. His wife, Melek, never believed in her husband's guilt, convinced that he had implicated himself while pursuing a noble cause. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Today, we're faced with another unfortunate case. On November 6, 2014, Mexico City police officers found human remains. A part of the torso was found in a vacant lot near the exit from the city. A few days later, bags with arms and legs were found in different parts of the capital. The horrifying fact was the absence of fingers on the limbs. The police sounded the alarm. Apparently, a particularly violent criminal was at work in the region. Squads of officers were assembled and combed the streets. The main goal was to find the head and limbs of the unfortunate man and prevent further crimes. At that moment, everyone was sure that this case was the work of a brutal serial killer. The fingers and head were never found. However, thanks to the professional work of forensic experts, it was determined that the remains belonged to the same person. But due to the absence of fingers and teeth, it was impossible to find out who this person was. The story unfolds in North America. The main character, a resident of Mexico City, Alejandra Lafuente, a searing brunette with gorgeous hair and bright brown eyes, which further emphasized the thick black as tar lashes. She had an athletic, trim figure, which she tried to maintain by practicing fitness, yoga, and breathing exercises. Alejandra loved to take care of herself. She could often be found at a beauty salon, massage, or spa. In warm weather, she lounged on the beach doing scientific work, and on cloudy days she could visit tanning salons. In general, we can say that the young woman loved herself very much and considered herself the standard of female attractiveness. Alejandra did not lag behind in terms of career. Her father is a doctor of sciences, a famous psychiatrist, Alberto da Fuente. He is a luminary of science, deals with such deviations of the psyche, such as schizophrenia and manic disorders, and he is famous not only for his scientific work, but also for his experiments on patients. For Alejandra, her father was an idol. Wanting to achieve the same success, she followed in his footsteps. To do so, she enrolled in the best university for psychiatry and graduated with honors. Her perseverance, resourcefulness, extraordinary intelligence, as well as her father's connections, helped her to write and defend her thesis on manic syndrome. However, in the future, psychiatry, Alejandra did not become engaged in psychiatry. She was attracted by the work of a psychotherapist. Thanks to her father's money, the young woman got a license and opened her office in a new business center in the heart of the capital. There was no shortage of clients, but she only saw women. Women with eating disorders, depression, relationship problems, and low self-esteem came for counseling. Alejandra helped to solve family problems, but as it often happens, her personal life left much to be desired. The young woman's first marriage broke up, but in the end, the couple had 2 children. 2 charming girls with Alejandra's eyes and her father's sense of humor. However, Alejandra was not discouraged. In her opinion, 2 children were no reason to give up on herself. She still dreamed of meeting her other half, a man who could also be a good father to her daughters. Sometime after the couple separated, the ex-husband, whose name is not disclosed, came home to Alejandra. It was a normal practice for the couple. The man would come on weekends to give time to his little girls and help his ex-wife with household chores if needed. However, the ex-husband had no idea that this visit would turn out to be his last. Alejandra asked him to enter the house through the backyard, reasoning that the lock on the front door was jammed. The man made his way into the house. Alejandra said that her youngest daughter was bathing right now and asked him to come into her bathroom. Suspecting nothing, the man went in there. There was a ringing silence in the house. There were no sounds, the usual cartoons, the laughter of children. The man went into the bathroom. There was tape on the floor, and there was no daughter in the filled bathtub. He began to realize that something was going wrong. Right at that second, his ex-wife stood behind him with a hammer and delivered a blow with all her might to his head, then another one. The man fell. Blood was pouring out of the gaping hole in his skull. Everything around him was covered in blood. As the experts later found out, the man had no chance to save himself. Death occurred almost instantly after the first blow with a heavy blunt object. The eldest daughter, who unexpectedly returned early from a friend, became an unwitting witness to this truly horrifying picture. The children often observed their parents' quarrels. Alejandra was determined to be mentally disturbed. She often took it out on her friends. Friends even noticed how the young woman could hit her husband. They often noticed scratches on his arms and neck. As for the housemates, they constantly observed her tantrums in an even place and inadequate behavior. But this time the situation got out of control. The daughter ran out of the house and began to call for help. Almost immediately, a neighbor came running, who then called the police squad. The psychologist was arrested and charged with murder. At the station, the young woman was placed in a cell, where she had to stay for a month until her first hearing. At the trial, Alejandra denied her guilt. Lawyers put forward a version of self-defense. According to them, the ex-husband was intensely jealous of Alejandra and made up that she was bringing men into the house, which could negatively affect the psyche of little girls. On the day of the crime, he showed up unplanned at his ex-wife's house, went through the back door, hoping to catch his wife with another man. Then he pounced on Alejandra, who was in the bathroom at the time trying to put together a nightstand. She then had to exert self-defense, in which she delivered 2 blows to the back of her ex-husband's head. On June 14, 2012, the sentence was handed down. Taking into account the evidence provided by the defense in the presence of 2 minor children, Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months. Thanks to the coordinated work of lawyers and the money of his father, the term behind bars was replaced by a suspended sentence. A couple of months later, the appeal was filed again with a request to drop the charges. The argument was assault in self-defense. Human rights activists asked for a jury trial. They felt unbearably sorry for the poor woman who was presented at trial as a victim of domestic violence. As a result, the court reviewed the case and handed down an acquittal. After her release, the young woman proceeded to provide her psychological counseling as before. She created an image of a victim of gender inequality who fought for her rights like most women in North America and finally won. This created image made Alejandra even more popular to potential clients. Soon, Maria Alejandra met Alan Carrera Cuela, a large Mexican businessman, the son of Adrian Carrera Francis. He was a tall, handsome, and statuesque man. His father had previously been head of special services for the Central District, and had achieved considerable success in his career. Soon, Alan expanded his business and created a whole chain of construction stores that began to open all over the country. Part of Alan's business was legalized, but the other part, which few people knew about, was closely connected with crime. By the way, it was for this reason that his father was removed from his position when one of his son's financial frauds was uncovered. In addition, Alan had a stake in a criminal group that was engaged in the transportation of psychotropic substances to the United States. Their base was located in a border town and was guarded by purchased police officers. This group controlled a small portion of the trafficking of psychoactive substances in the South. Alan's father was proven to be involved in his son's affairs. The police managed to get a statement out of him, so he was facing a 20-year prison sentence. But on July 18, 2000, Adrian Carrera was released early thanks to the Witness Protection Program. Immediately after his release, he devoted all his time to his son and his legitimate business. The son grew up quickly, adopting his father's views and experiences. After graduating from college, Alan Carrera decided to follow in his father's footsteps and became an entrepreneur. He was very interested in the store of household appliances, which, despite his young years, he completely led himself. This business was not as large as his father's, but it brought good money. There were always a lot of women around him, but Alan from childhood was in love with a classmate, whom he took as his wife, smart, beautiful, from a good family. The marriage was short, but bright. Daddy had a beautiful daughter. However, a lot of work and almost total absence of Alan at home led this marriage to divorce. Alan was extremely hard to part with the woman he loved since high school. New novels did not bring pleasure, and loneliness and sadness led to the fact that the man began to drink. Gradually, this grew into a pernicious habit. In an attempt to cope with prolonged depression and love for alcohol, Alan tried many ways: books, AA circles, drips. Until one day, fate did not lead the man to a consultation with the famous psychiatrist Alberto, the father of Maria Alejandra. Alan's now ex-wife was also going through a difficult divorce. Alan was the only man in the young woman's life, and despite the separation, she could not allow anyone else to her. To somehow get rid of her loneliness, Alan's ex-wife also decided to visit a therapist. The psychiatrist, with whom Alan was rehabilitated, explained that he could not lead both spouses for ethical reasons, and therefore recommended the woman to turn to Alejandra. However, it is worth noting that he did not inform the clients that Alejandra was his daughter. Alejandra quickly realized that her patient's ex-husband could be a great match. He was said to be a pleasant man in the prime of life, and quite wealthy. Not thinking long, Alejandra asked her client to bring her ex-husband for another consultation. According to the therapist, she would be able to solve their problem in one session and break the strong bond between the former spouses. From the very first minutes of the steamy session, Alejandra began to put her plan to seduce the entrepreneur into action. The result did not wait long. Immediately after the session, Alan offered the therapist a cup of coffee to discuss family problems. For propriety, the young woman at first even refused to go on a date, because it was contrary to medical ethics. But the date took place the same evening. Between them quite quickly spun an affair. Soon Alan's ex-wife found out about it. She was shocked. She even wanted to report the incident to the doctor's ethics committee, but she didn't. Alejandra was a very competent specialist, and therefore was able to convince her client to let the situation go. After all, it says jealousy and unwillingness to let go of the former spouse, and so, according to the doctor, a happy future will not work. In the commission, Alan's ex-wife decided not to apply, but also with the sessions were over. Meanwhile, the relationship with the newly married couple developed quite rapidly. A few months after the first date, the young people decided to live together. After 2 more months, they decided to legalize their relationship. But Alan did not even suspect what skeletons in his closet hides his fiancée, and what were the reasons for divorcing her ex-husband. In April 2014, Alan decided to visit his parents and flew to them for the weekend. It became a great occasion to talk about his beloved and the imminent wedding. Alan's parents were extremely surprised that they would find out such important things so late. They had never heard of Alejandra in their son's life before, which was very strange. A week after the meeting with the parents, the marriage was registered. Interestingly, Alejandra asked her husband not to call her friends and relatives. Invitations were not sent. The wedding was supposed to be modest, and the budget did not allow inviting everyone one would have liked. However, as it later turned out, the bride's father did attend the marriage ceremony. At first, the life of the young family seemed like a fairy tale. Young, happy with a huge number of plans and desires. But it did not last long. Alejandra could not hide her hysterical character. Approach the horrifying denouement of this story, but no one suspects it yet. The relationship between the newlyweds began to change dramatically. Alan was a rather secretive person, and with friends, details of personal life did not share. Therefore, about what was happening behind the closed doors of the couple, little was known. However, it was obvious that the former relationship gave a crack, and the couple no longer seemed so happy. After meeting Alejandra, Alan distanced himself from his family. The last straw was the wedding, to which parents were not invited. After that, they even stopped calling each other. Alan's remaining buddies began to notice that his spouse became more nervous, sometimes behaving inadequately and quickly losing her temper. After a couple of such incidents, Alan was very ashamed and decided to minimize joint meetings. Quarrels in the family occurred on a daily basis and almost always unfounded. One evening, Alejandra, by her own testimony, decided to get into her husband's cell phone. As is usually the case, correspondence with some women was discovered, with quite racy content. Of course, it was impossible to turn a blind eye to such things. According to Alejandra, this was the last straw. She reported in court that her husband beat her, insulted and humiliated her in every possible way. When cheating was also discovered, it was pointless to save this marriage. For unknown reasons, Alejandra did not apply traditional methods of psychotherapy and try to save the relationship. Having thought of her husband's cheating, the young woman decided to deal with Alan with a method already known to her. As soon as she made this decision, all her attention could be focused on creating the perfect murder plan. Meanwhile, Alan continued his usual and measured rhythm of life. He didn't even realize what was in store for him. Alan still rarely communicated with his family, but he could not miss the traditional feast, which the family held annually in honor of his beloved grandfather's birthday. Alan, of course, came to the feast, but his parents made it clear that his wife, not the most welcome guest in their house. This situation pissed Alejandra off and further aggravated the relationship in the couple. Was it possible to imagine that this would be the last time the family saw Alan alive? On October 31, 2014, Alan's phone was last used to send a text message to his family that he had reached home safely after his birthday party. He has not been in touch since then. He hadn't been seen at work for a few days either, which was quite strange because it had never happened before. The entrepreneur was extremely responsible for his work, and soon the launch of a new store was expected, and the presence of the head was simply necessary. The reason for this was a terrifying plan of the spouse, which she put into action. After Alan returned from the holiday, there was another scandal, after which Alejandra decided to immediately dispose of her husband. She added a powerful sleeping pill to the milk he traditionally drank before going to bed. Then she smothered him with a pillow. She enjoyed watching her husband slowly lose consciousness in a pathetic attempt to remove the pillow and take a breath. Then came the hardest part, getting rid of the body. It was a moment she hadn't had time to plan for. Alan was too heavy, so she had to make do with what she had. Time was short, so Alejandra ran to the neighbor's vegetable garden to get an electric saw. With a grim smile on her face, she sawed her husband's body into pieces. Only a true sadist could do such a thing. Then she packed the body parts into garbage bags and had the foresight to cut off fingers and pull teeth. It was these that would help the investigation in identifying the person, in case the body was found. Alejandra stuffed all the bags into suitcases so that she could remove the corpse from the house without suspicion, but she did not succeed. As dawn approached, Alejandra was unable to leave the house with the suitcase unnoticed. An elderly neighbor, who suffered from insomnia, watched her from her window. She was a little alarmed by the young woman's early departure. Besides, for some reason, her husband did not help to lift the heavier suitcases. and Alejandra was behaving very strangely. She was always looking around. At dawn, Alejandra returned home. This surprised the vigilant neighbor even more. As it would later turn out, she had scattered bags of her ex-husband's remains in different neighborhoods to cover her tracks. As the new day dawned, she went on with her normal life. On November 6, 2014, Mexican police officers discovered the first horrifying find, a human torso with no teeth and no fingers on the hand. The entire police force was put on alert as the incident was egregious in its level of brutality. Less than a day later, other body parts were found in various parts of the city. It is also interesting that the distance between the places where the packages were found was quite significant. Later, this is what would be attributed to Alejandra's long absence from home. All the body parts were sent to the best forensic laboratory, where experts quickly established the fact that all the parts belonged to the same person. In order to avert suspicion from herself, the perpetrator started writing messages to Alan's relatives. She wanted to avert suspicion, but she only made things worse. She didn't even know that her husband had recently distanced himself from the family and had no contact with his relatives. Alejandra informed Alan's parents on his behalf that they were going on vacation and would be out of touch. The whole plan was ruined by Alejandra's father. Alberto began making phone calls to Alan's father's house. He wanted to clarify if his son-in-law's family knew Alejandra's location. Alberto hadn't heard from her in a while, and the patients are very worried about not being able to attend counseling sessions. Later, he calls Alan's relatives again to inform them that his daughter has been found and that she had to be forcibly admitted to the clinic because she is suffering from depression due to her husband's cheating. This greatly frightened the relatives, and they tried to find Alan, but all was unsuccessful, and then the family of the businessman turned to the police. The laboratory experts decided to compare the remains of the corpse recently found with Alan's characteristics. The similarity was 100%, and his relatives also identified him. It was especially hard for Alan's grandfather. Soon after the identification, he became ill with heart disease because it was his only grandson. The investigation issued a search warrant for Alan's home and office. A hillock of fresh earth was found in the backyard of the house. After digging, the man's fingers and teeth were discovered. The find further shocked the capital city. Alejandra was immediately apprehended. Traces of blood were also found in one of the rooms, as well as on the trunk of the car and in the garage. At first, Alejandra tried to deny her guilt. She hoped that she would be able to get away with it with impunity, as she had with her previous husband. But the investigation quickly sorted out the case. The testimony of an elderly witness helped. The time she gave coincided with Alan's estimated time of death. Alejandra used her position to obtain a powerful sleeping pill, a kind of drug only a doctor could get his hands on. This further aggravated the case. The evidence obtained helped establish a link between Alejandra and the brutal massacre of her husband. CCTV cameras also helped trace that the man had gone into the house and never came out of the house again. The fact that the suitcases were taken out was also confirmed by CCTV footage. On December 10, 2014, the jury reached a verdict. Alejandra was sentenced to life imprisonment. Murder with brutality, an attempt to conceal this fact, the use of official position, all this was not in favor of the former psychotherapist. Her father, who through the use of connections and bribes tried to spare his daughter from imprisonment, could not help either. But all he managed to do was to keep the trial closed to the public and the press in order to avoid more publicity. However, he did it all for the sake of his own career. Now hardly anyone else will turn to a specialist who raised such a ruthless monster and could not diagnose problems in time with his own daughter. The case of the death of Alejandra's first husband also came to mind at the trial. However, due to the passage of years, the evidence in this case was not found. The version of Alejandra's father's involvement in what happened was also considered. There were suspicions that he was in collusion with his daughter, and they committed crimes on the basis of scientific interest. However, this idea found no evidence. After several appeals from the victims, the sentence was commuted to death. This is an unprecedented situation. Such sentences are extremely rare in Mexico, especially in these times. The defendant is also not entitled to a review of the case. The house and all the property of the accused must go to the family of the victim. although who can be comforted by this if the person can no longer be brought back? Apparently, Alejandra was a pragmatic and cruel woman. She had major mental health issues, although medical examinations denied that she had any. She also harbored the influence of her father and used her official position to carry out her manic plans. Impunity after her first crime had only unleashed her. Alejandra felt invulnerable and continued to do evil. Perhaps Alan would still be alive if this horrible woman had not been acquitted the first time, but it was too late to talk about it now. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. The case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, doomsday spouses. Crimes motivated by religious beliefs are not uncommon in criminal practice. Statistics show that every year, worldwide, over 100,000 people fall victim to religious fanatics. Often these victims do not share the fanatics' orthodox views. The case of the deranged duo, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, shook the world a few years ago and remains unresolved to this day. This story has been covered in media outlets across various countries, shocking and baffling people. It's a tale entwined with corrupt passion, belief in one's own exceptionalism, greed, and a complete lack of moral principles. 5 members of their own families, including 2 children, fell victim to this couple. Currently, the legal proceedings against the spouses from hell, as the press has dubbed them, are still ongoing. They face capital punishment for their heinous acts. However, they not only deny their guilt, but also seriously hope to escape punishment or receive minimal sentences. But let's start from the beginning and try to unravel this horrifying and complex story, an attempt to understand how people who claim to have found God completely lost their humanity. Who is Chad Daybell, and how did he become a leader of a religious movement? Chad Guy Daybell was born on August 11, 1968, in the small town of Provo, Utah, located 18 miles south of Salt Lake City. He grew up in a simple, even humble family, and was a quiet, shy child. Chad was an average student in school, without any notable talents or athletic achievements, and he was self-conscious about his weight. After finishing high school, Chad, not without difficulty, enrolled at Brigham Young University, BYU, in Utah, graduating in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in journalism. During his college years, he married a modest girl named Tamara, or simply Tammy Douglas. The couple quickly had 5 children, sons Seth, Mark, and Garth, and daughters Emma and Leah. After completing his studies, the young father worked as an editor at a local daily newspaper. However, due to the family's constant financial struggles, he also worked as a night watchman at a small church and as a gravedigger at the cemetery next to it. Since Tammy did not work outside the home and focused solely on household chores and raising their children, the family barely made ends meet. At one point, Chad decided to use his journalism education to write his own religious-themed book. His first work was published in 1999 and resembled a collection of religious stories or religious-themed fantasy. Surprisingly, the book became a hit, earning him a decent amount of money. Chad immediately quit his jobs at the cemetery and the newspaper to focus on his writing career. About a year and a half later, he published a book titled 1 Foot in the Grave. This was a popular science work in which he described his experiences as a gravedigger, pondered death, the afterlife, and soul reincarnations. In 2004, Daybell founded his own book company, Spring Creek, which he used to self-publish his works. These works discussed his beliefs about the impending end of the world, Judgment Day, and more. Some say that over the years, Chad's religious beliefs became more extreme. Chad Daybell published dozens of fiction and popular science books infused with religious themes. He began to conduct podcasts, audio, and video lectures aimed at helping people prepare for the second coming of Christ. Chad called himself an apocalyptic writer and claimed he could see the future, hearing voices of the deceased giving prophecies meant only for him. The Story of Lori Vallow, Biography, Early Marriages, Children. Lori Ryan Vallow, née Cox, was born on June 26, 1973, in the picturesque city of Loma Linda, California. She grew up in a large family, alongside 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked tirelessly to provide for their many children. From an early age, Laurie was particularly close to her brother Alex, with whom she shared a trusting relationship. He always stood up for his little sister and protected her. Even in her school years, Laurie became a true beauty, with no shortage of admirers. An attractive, charismatic blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile, she loved being the center of attention and was a spirited and adventurous person. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Laurie married her high school sweetheart Nelson Yanes, with whom she had started a relationship in her senior year. However, the young couple soon realized they had rushed into marriage and were not ready for family life, leading to the dissolution of their marriage in less than a year. They did not have any children together. In the fall of 1995, Laurie remarried, this time to a man named William LaJoya. A year later, the couple had a son, Colby, but their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years later. The boy remained in his mother's custody. In early 2001, Laurie entered into her third marriage with Joseph Anthony Ryan, who officially adopted her son from her previous marriage. A year later, the couple welcomed a daughter, Tylee, but this marriage too collapsed in 2005. Notably, soon after her divorce from Joseph, an incident occurred when her ex-husband came to visit the children. He was assaulted by Laurie's brother Alex, who claimed in court that he was defending his sister's honor, as Ryan had insulted her. As a result, Cox was sentenced to a fine and a short prison term. Marriage to Charles Vallow. Soon after divorcing her third husband, Laurie met a man named Charles Anthony Vallow, whom she married in February 2006. He was 17 years her senior, but this significant age difference did not pose an obstacle for them. Charles had been previously married and had 2 teenage sons from his past relationships, Zachary and Nicholas. The couple initially lived in Nevada with Laurie's children from her previous marriages, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided a stable income to support the family. Laurie, who had not pursued further education, did not work, but her husband never reproached her for it. In 2014, the couple officially adopted a young boy named Joshua Jackson, or simply JJ Vallow, who was Charles's grandnephew. JJ had autism and required expensive therapy, which his relative could provide. Towards the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands, specifically to the island of Kauai. By this time, Colby, as well as Charles's older children, were adults living independently, so the Vallow family moved to the island as a group of 4, Laurie, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. The family settled in a popular tourist area, deciding to open their own beach bar specializing in fresh juices, smoothies, refreshing drinks, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite all their efforts, the availability of raw materials, and Charles's experience in trade, the business quickly failed due to intense competition. Around this time, Laurie became interested in religious literature and was particularly drawn to a series of books titled Standing in Holy Places by the aforementioned Chad Daybell. She became so captivated by the occult writer's views and thoughts that she became almost obsessed with his ideas. She purchased all his works and read them daily. The meeting of Laurie Vallow and Chad Daybell. In 2016, the family was forced to leave Hawaii and return to the mainland. They settled in Arizona, and while Charles worked hard to provide for the family, his wife Laurie increasingly immersed herself in religion, drifting away from reality. In October 2018, Laurie and her close friend Melanie attended an event in a neighboring town called Preparing People for the Second Coming of Christ, led by Chad Daybell. As a devoted fan and follower, Laurie was thrilled at the opportunity to meet him in person. Laurie sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on Chad. He also noticed the attractive blonde, and after the event, when the writer and religious speaker decided to personally engage with his followers, Laurie, as expected, stayed behind. She hung on his every word and asked if she could touch his hand. After doing so, Daybell looked into her eyes and said that they had been husband and wife in 7 previous reincarnations. Chad and Laurie exchanged contact information and began communicating daily. A few weeks later, when Lori's husband went to Nevada for work, she invited the preacher to hold a gathering at her home. That day, about a dozen people gathered at the Vallow house, discussing God, the Judgment Day, and the Second Coming. Lori and Chad also agreed to collaborate on preparing people for the dreadful judgment. The pair started conducting podcasts dedicated to this event, leading sermons and writing articles. Lori became increasingly detached from reality and her family, but Charles, unfortunately, did not immediately notice this change. He thought it was a temporary obsession and would soon wear off. By the time he realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. Soon, Lori began talking about dark spirits and zombies, telling family and friends that she was chosen by God for a special mission. Part of this mission involved destroying the spirits of darkness, demons, and all evil. Charles's attempts to bring his wife back to reality failed, and more so, she began to see him as one of the dark entities that needed to be destroyed. The tragic end of Charles Vallow. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lori and Charles Vallow was on the brink of collapse. In February 2019, during Charles's week-long business trip, Lori changed all the locks in their shared home. Upon his return, Charles found himself locked out of his own house, noticed his personal car, the family truck missing, and discovered that a substantial amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. Charles loudly called out for his wife and tried to enter the house. Lori, in a frenzied state, rushed outside, hurling threats and curses. She screamed that her husband's soul had long died, his body possessed by a demon, repeatedly exclaiming, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Without hesitation, Charles went to the police station and reported Lori for theft, obstruction to his home and children. He expressed concerns about her threats of physical harm against him, leading to the issuance of a protective order prohibiting Lori from approaching him. The statements Charles made that evening were recorded, a standard procedure. He spoke about his wife's excessive religious fervor, her belief in an imminent end of the world, and her tendency to classify people as either light or demonic beings. The officers, while asking clarifying questions, openly mocked him, but still issued the protective order. The very next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. His lawyers stated that Charles was concerned about the well-being of JJ, who required special care. He knew his mother and sister would responsibly manage the insurance payout and take care of the boy in case anything happened to him. As for Tylee, her stepfather had not legally adopted her and couldn't include the legally unrelated minor in the documents. A few months later, Mr. Vallow made the fateful mistake of revoking the protective order, hoping to reconcile with Lori and save their marriage. He began visiting his ex-wife's home, missing the children, and still hopeful of family reconciliation. On July 11, 2019, Charles was fatally shot twice in the chest when he arrived to see his children. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, called emergency services and confessed to the shooting. He claimed self-defense, alleging that Charles attacked him first with a baseball bat. In response, he drew a pistol and fired twice without aiming. The incident was witnessed by the homeowner and children. Their testimonies were somewhat consistent, and the court ruled the incident as an unintentional killing in self-defense. Notably, Alex's head injury was minor, despite Charles's background as a former baseball player capable of inflicting severe harm with a bat. The same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori threw a party at the house with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco, right where her husband had been shot, and where traces of blood were still visible. She didn't arrange for his funeral or inform anyone about the incident. Charles's sons, mother, sister, and other relatives only learned about his death a week later, when his unclaimed body was still in the morgue. A series of mysterious disappearances and fatalities. Shortly after her husband's demise, Lori sold their Arizona home and, along with her children, relocated to a town called Rexburg in Idaho, settling close to where Chad and his wife Tammy lived. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, moved with his sister and settled in the same housing complex. Lori enrolled her son in a school for children with special needs, but her 16-year-old daughter Tylee did not attend any educational institution. She was seldom seen outside, leading many neighbors to remain unaware of the second child's existence. Around the same time, Laurie referred to her daughter as a dark entity in a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, the children, their mother, and Uncle Alex went to Yellowstone Park, where Chad Daybell joined them. Several photographs from that trip showed Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen alive again. On September 24th of the same year, Laurie withdrew her son's documents from the school, claiming he would henceforth be homeschooled. The 7-year-old boy was also not seen afterward. Less than a month later, on October 19th, Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, passed away suddenly. According to Chad, she had a cold with a cough and presumably died from respiratory failure in her sleep. With no signs of violence on her body, her death was ruled natural. Chad categorically refused an autopsy to definitively determine the cause, a decision that oddly raised no suspicions. Following his wife's sudden passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks later, Chad and Laurie traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they officially married in a beachside ceremony. This event came as a total shock and surprise to Daybell's children, who were still mourning their mother and couldn't comprehend their father's actions. Upon returning to Arizona, the couple lived together and misled others by claiming Laurie's children were with relatives, or even asserting she had no children at all. They also rented a small unit at a local storage facility, where they later moved all the belongings of the children as if they never existed in the home. Another month later, on December 12, 2019, Alex Cox died suddenly in his home. The cause of death appeared to be a heart attack, but at his sister's insistence, no autopsy was conducted, and the incident was deemed natural. Investigation, arrest, and horrific discoveries. As time passed, more people persistently questioned Laurie about the whereabouts of her children. She skillfully lied to neighbors and acquaintances, but it was more complicated with relatives. Her eldest son, Colby, who had little contact with his mother after moving away, tried earnestly to reach his younger sister. Initially, Laurie answered from her daughter's phone, pretending to be Tylee, but Colby soon sensed something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles's relatives demanded access to JJ. They wanted to take the boy for holidays or weekends or simply talk to him on the phone, but Laurie consistently refused or made up absurd excuses. Eventually, the boy's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police, and soon after, Colby also approached the police to find his younger sister. When law enforcement officers knocked on Laurie's door and asked her to bring the children for a conversation, she lied that they were visiting relatives. This information proved false, and the police returned to her home. They gave her a week to appear at the police station with the children, but instead, she and her husband fled to Hawaii again. On February 20th, 2020, Laurie was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search was conducted in her and Chad's home, but neither the children nor any signs that they had been there were found. Now her husband Chad, who had been defending her and insisting she had no children, was also under suspicion. It was only on June 9th that police discovered human remains buried in the backyard of the couple's home. Forensic analysis revealed that they were the bodies of the missing Tylee and her younger brother JJ. Chad was immediately detained for concealing evidence and complicity. The authorities then decided to exhume the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to establish the true causes of their deaths. In both cases, traces of chemicals capable of inducing heart failure were found, leading to the conclusion that these individuals did not die naturally. The trial process. The trial of the spouses commenced in January 2021. They faced charges of conspiring to commit first-degree criminal acts, grand theft through deceit, and insurance fraud. Moreover, the demise of Charles Vallow was reclassified from self-defense to premeditated criminal action. Witnesses testifying in court stated that Laurie referred to her children as dark entities and promised to save their souls. There were speculations that the deaths of 16-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old JJ might have had ritualistic elements. Notably, the adolescent girl's body was partially burned. Weeks before, Chad had sent Laurie an email rating people, where he assigned Tylee a 2 as a dark spirit. Given the totality of the charges, both spouses faced the possibility of capital punishment. However, in May 2021, Vallow's defense team succeeded in having her declared incompetent, halting the trial process. Simultaneously, all 5 of Daybell's adult children insist on their father's innocence, believing he was framed by Lori and Alex. In 2022, after treatment in a psychiatric facility, Vallow was again deemed fit to stand trial and answer for her actions. In March 2023, the judge ruled out capital punishment as a sentence for the woman, a decision the prosecution is still attempting to contest. In July of the same year, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The trial against Chad continues, and he still faces the prospect of capital punishment. It is worth noting that this story inspired the book When the Moon Turns to Blood by investigative journalist Lily Sotail, as well as a 2021 television movie by Lifetime Movie Network titled Doomsday Mom: The Lori Vallow Story, starring Lauren Lee Smith. In addition, Netflix released a 3-part documentary series in 2022 called Sins of Our Mother, which includes an episode dedicated to Lori's eldest child, her son Colby. In 2012, the family of one of the richest people in Brazil, businessman Marcos Matsunaga, became the center of attention after Marcos disappeared on the eve of a major billion-dollar deal. The case shocked the whole country, and photos of the inconsolable widow of the millionaire did not leave the front pages of the leading national publications. Initially, as the main version, the police considered the intrigues of competitors who could kidnap and get rid of the businessman in order to disrupt the upcoming deal. However, the revealed truth turned out to be much more cruel and terrible. The story of a cold-blooded murder and a monstrous attempt to cover up the crime formed the basis of several documentaries. Who is Marcos Matsunaga? Entrepreneur Marcos Matsunaga was one of the richest people in Brazil and ran a family business producing various food products, Yoki. The company was founded by Marcos's grandfather, who had once emigrated across the ocean. His name was Yoshizo Kitano, actually, from the first letters of the surname and first name of the founder, and the name of the brand was formed. The foundation of the future business empire was laid in the middle of the last century. It is noteworthy that it all started with a small flour milling enterprise, which managed not only to survive, but also thrive during the years of crisis and war, and then transformed into a huge company with a worldwide reputation and the widest range of products. Marcos was born into a wealthy family, and from an early age he knew no denial of anything. He did not have to build and develop his business from scratch, because he inherited everything that his grandfather and father had created, becoming the CEO of the family food company. He had every chance to become the first billionaire in his family, and he strived for this almost all his conscious life, but such grandiose plans were not destined to materialize. Everyone who was personally acquainted with Marcos characterized him as a good and quite talented businessman, who managed not only to save, but also to multiply the family capital, several times increasing profits. But he was not an easy man. Capricious, arrogant, with a heavy character, and a constant desire to control everyone who was near him. In addition, the businessman was far from handsome in appearance. He suffered from childhood overweight, had problems with vision, because of which he wore glasses, and he was also short in stature and somewhat clumsy. All this from an early age created a lot of problems for the boy when communicating with his peers. He had almost no friends and female representatives of the female sex, and it all shunned this strange and peculiar guy. Marcos, for a long time, all failed to build a long and serious relationship with anyone, because beyond a couple of dates, it did not go. Even his own business and multi-million-dollar inheritance did not make him an enviable and desirable bachelor. He repulsed women with his arrogance and egoism, so Marcos often used the services of escorts and representatives of the ancient profession. There is practically no information about the entrepreneur's first wife in open sources. It is only known that he did not marry out of great love or passion, but rather out of desperation and at the insistence of his relatives. Despite this, the marriage lasted several years, although both spouses almost immediately began to regret their decision to start a family. At first, the young wife tried to put up with the complex character of the businessman, hoping that in time they will manage to become a happy couple where both support and understand each other. But the young woman was wrong, and over the years they only increasingly distanced from each other. Also, Marcos constantly cheated on her and did not even try to hide it or somehow justify it. And he looked for mistresses mainly on websites where girls offered intimacy for money. Alice was one of those girls. She was an escort, and her portfolio was available on the relevant platforms. It was there that the businessman noticed a bright, attractive blonde with a beautiful figure and began to regularly invite her on dates, generously paying for them. Alice was 6 years younger than him. She was born and raised in a very poor and dysfunctional family living in one of the most crime-ridden areas of the city. Alice didn't know her own father. Her mother was a heavy drinker, and she was involved with men who shared her addiction. The girl had a hard and joyless childhood. At a very young age, she was repeatedly beaten, harassed, and abused by her mother's roommates. Barely finished school, Alice literally ran away from home and forever left the neighborhood in which she grew up. The girl took nursing courses, after which she got a job at a hospice. However, she soon realized that caring for dying patients is far from the limit of her dreams and abilities. In addition, sensitive and vulnerable young woman quickly became attached to people, and the death of each patient perceived as a personal tragedy. A few years later, Alice decided to get a higher education and completely change her occupation. Her choice fell on the law, which she considered a promising occupation, opening in life almost all the doors. She had long been preparing for admission and was able to score the required number of points in the entrance exams, but to pay for her studies from her modest salary as a nurse, she could not. Alice had no one to help her, because she had severed all ties with her relatives after she left home. Then, young, pretty Alice, with a slender figure, decided to earn on her external data and registered on a site specializing in the provision of escort services. There she was helped to create a bright personal page, and soon wealthy men themselves began to show interest in the young blonde beauty. Escorting and providing intimate services brought Alice a good income, allowing her to pay for her studies and fully support herself. But she planned to leave this specific occupation as soon as she got her diploma and got a job in her specialty. During this period, Alice met Marcos, who became one of her regular customers. He was generous with gifts and met regularly with Alice without hiding from anyone. She knew that the businessman was married, but at the time she couldn't have dreamed that one of the richest men in the country would leave his wife for her. The story of Alice Matsunaga was like a Cinderella tale. A poor girl from a disadvantaged family, engaged in providing escort services, meets a multi-millionaire who soon falls madly in love with her. Marcos really literally lost his head, but now it is impossible to say for sure whether Alice herself made efforts to do so. After about 6 months, Marcos realized that he wanted not just to date his new young mistress, but to be with her permanently. He, without a second thought and regret, filed for divorce from his first wife and began to present everyone Alice as his fiancée. For obvious reasons, the businessman did not want anyone to know about how he met his chosen one and what she earned a living. Therefore, the couple came up with a quite ordinary story of a casual acquaintance in a cafe and adhered to this version. Even the closest relatives and few friends of Marcos did not guess anything. However, Alice in the family Matsunaga received not too welcome. The parents of the entrepreneur guessed that this attractive young person put into action all her charm to fall in love with the rich but ugly Marcos. And now she was going to great lengths to pretend that she did not notice his hard character. Nevertheless, when Marcos announced his intention to divorce his first wife and marry Alice, no one strongly objected. The businessman arranged a lavish wedding in the traditional style, with a white dress, a large number of guests, and a huge tiered cake. After that, he moved his wife to his huge and luxurious mansion, where she became a full-fledged mistress. Matsunagi had long been known as an avid collector of expensive wines and rare weapons. For wines in his house was built a huge cellar, where the bottles were carefully sorted by year and country. And for weapons, the house had a secret room, on the walls of which from floor to ceiling flaunted firearms and edged weapons. Marcos was very proud of his collections and was constantly engaged in their replenishment. However, in addition, his house was literally full of antiques, luxury goods, and modern art. which tastelessly hung on the walls and stood literally on all surfaces. Soon after the wedding, the couple decided that they were ready to have an heir, but despite all their efforts, Alice for a long time did not get pregnant naturally. Then the couple decided to resort to the procedure of in vitro fertilization, but even here success awaited them far from immediately. When their common daughter was born, it seemed that the happiness of the couple now has no limits. The young parents were engaged in the education of the long-awaited baby girl, made plans for the future, and when the girl grew up a little, the whole family began to travel the world, getting acquainted with different cultures and traditions. Their daughter was a real little princess who was brought up in love, care, and luxury. But the couple had one very specific common hobby: hunting large animals. Although it would be more correct to say that it was always a hobby of Marcos, who at different times tried to join it to his chosen women and his first wife. But most women did not just dislike this activity, it frankly repulsed them. The businessman no longer hoped that he would meet someone who would share his passion. Now many believe that Alice became interested in hunting to win even more favor Marcos and conquer his heart. At first, they visited shooting ranges together, where Alice learned how to handle different types of firearms, and afterward they went into the woods together to hunt wild animals. Alice felt no pity when she took the lives of animals and treated it as a kind of competition. Either you do it or you don't. Marcos liked this approach, and he liked to watch his wife handle her weapons and stalk her prey. He also taught her how to skin and carve wild boars, deer, and other forest creatures. Together they skinned them and separated body parts using large knives, special cleavers, and axes. In addition, the family did not have cats or dogs as pets, but poisonous snakes for which special terrariums were built, with conditions as close as possible to their natural habitat. It was the realization of another long-time dream of Marcos, who adored snakes, but his first wife did not approve of the idea of having a home terrarium. Alice had really bought Marcos off by sharing his rather strange hobbies. In the spring of 2012, the entrepreneur was preparing to make perhaps the main deal of his life and career, which would make him a billionaire and take his income to a whole new level. He was actively negotiating with several business partners, going to sell the family company, and the proceeds of the huge sum of money to invest in a new profitable business. At home at this time, Matsunaga rarely appeared because he was completely absorbed in work and the realization of his grandiose plans. He and his wife moved into an elite apartment complex located in the business center of the city, not far from the main office of the businessman's company. Marcos was away almost all the time, while his young wife was bored alone in a luxurious apartment with a panoramic view of the city. The businessman's work schedule was scheduled literally by the minute. He was lost in meetings, business meetings, and consultations with specialists. Often he did not even spend the night at home, but promised his wife that as soon as the deal was done, their lives would be completely changed and transformed. On May 19, 2012, on the eve of the deal for $1 billion, the entrepreneur disappeared without a trace. His wife reported the incident only the next day because she believed that Marcos at work. According to Alice, in the evening he was scheduled a meeting, which could last into the night, and early in the morning, her husband was to meet with a business partner, so he took some things, warned that, most likely to spend the night in the office, and then go straight to the deal. When the next day Marcos did not return home and stopped answering his phone, Alice became concerned and reported him missing. The police immediately found out that the entrepreneur did not show up for a meeting in the evening or an important meeting in the morning, which he simply could not miss. In this regard, there was immediately a version that the millionaire was kidnapped, and most likely, his family in the coming hours will receive ransom demands. But 24 hours passed. Then the second, no ransom demands were received, and hopes that Matsunaga was still alive were literally melting before our eyes. Investigators at this time did not sit idle and began to question relatives, friends, and business partners of the businessman, trying to find out whether he had enemies and who could be beneficial to his disappearance or the disruption of the upcoming deal. However, despite all efforts, it was not possible to find a specific person or people who might have wished the death of the businessman. He ran his business competently, was able to prioritize and plan his steps ahead, so that his strategic decisions made almost everyone always benefited. A few days later, after taking her little daughter, Alice came to the home of her father-in-law and mother-in-law to tell what she had not dared to tell the police. The young woman with tears in her eyes said that her husband has long been cheating on her with a girl named Natasha Villarreal Lima and did not hide it. True, after several major quarrels and threats to divorce, Marcos promised that he would leave the mistress for the sake of preserving the family. In fact, the man did not stop meeting with Natasha, but began to do it more carefully, so as not to provoke another family scandals. The wife guessed everything and decided to hire a private detective to gather evidence of the businessman's infidelity. Alice had photographs and videos of her husband on romantic dates with the same Natasha. It was noteworthy that he took his new girlfriend to the same restaurants and entertainment venues that he and his wife frequented and where everyone knew him. Marcos seemed to demonstrate to others how much he disdained his wife and can openly cheat on her without hiding from anyone. As it later turned out, Natasha Lima businessman found on the same site escort services where he once met Alice. They met for about 5 months, and during that time he gave her an expensive car and also paid a large sum of money for Natasha to remove her profile from the site. The available photos and videos proving her husband's cheating, the daughter-in-law presented to Marcos's parents. She also added that she had shown all this to Marcos the day before his disappearance, but instead of making excuses and asking for forgiveness, he simply packed his things, told his wife that he was leaving her, and then left their apartment and disappeared without a trace. Based on Alice's story, her husband, giving in to passion, simply decided to run away with a new mistress. But everyone who knew Matsunaga unanimously asserted that he could not just leave the business and disappear because he was too serious about the business, which for decades built his family. Answers to many questions were found about a week later, when in a deserted area, 100 kilometers from the house of the businessman, a passerby found scattered garbage bags, inside which were the remains of a human body. The man immediately reported the gruesome discovery to the police, and it soon became clear that the victim was Marcus Matsunaga, who was searched for all over the country. Experts determined that the businessman was killed by a shot to the head, after which his body was dismembered, packed into garbage bags, and taken to the outskirts of the city. It was noteworthy that the murderer, according to the pathologists, was either a surgeon or an experienced butcher who was proficient with a carving knife. Such a conclusion was inevitable, based on how accurately and professionally the cuts were made in the right places to separate the body parts from each other. At the first stage of the investigation did not have any concrete leads, so it was decided to start the investigation from the place where the deceased man was last seen alive. Elite residential complex where Marcos lived with his wife and daughter was equipped with numerous video surveillance cameras, the records of which began to be scrutinized. It turned out that the evening before the disappearance, the couple ordered food delivery home. On the recordings of the camera in the elevator was seen as Marcos goes down to the first floor and then comes back with boxes of pizza in his hands. He enters his apartment and never leaves it again, not that evening, not at night, and not the next day. Matsunagi seems to disappear into his own home, but in the morning his wife leaves the apartment with 3 large wheeled suitcases. The footage shows that the suitcases are very heavy, and she moves them with great difficulty. The investigators had already guessed what kind of luggage it was. On the same day, the businessman's widow was taken into custody and brought to the police station to testify. At first, she tried to deny everything and stuck to the initial version that her husband had left her for a mistress. But when she was shown the elevator footage, she burst into tears and started talking. According to Alice, their family life has long since broken down, and from the former idol is not left a trace. Her husband humiliated her, constantly reproached her with the work in the escort, saying that he pulled her out of the mud and also stated that she was a bad mother for their daughter. He also tried to control literally every move his wife made, not allowing her to make friends. When Alice once raised the topic of divorce, Marcos laughed and replied that he would leave her with nothing, take the child, and forbid her to see him. Alice said that on that fateful evening she showed her husband received from the detective pictures, which were captured Marcos with his mistress, but he only made him angry. He slapped his wife, and then, according to her, everything was as if in a fog. Alice does not remember how she got a gun in her hands, from which she shot her husband, and later, realizing what had happened, she decided to dispose of the body, making it look as if he disappeared without a trace. Alice had experience as a nurse and was familiar with human anatomy, and her husband had taught her how to skin and cut up animal carcasses, for which they had the necessary tools at home. All that followed was a matter of technique. While Alice was cutting up and bagging her husband's body, their young daughter was sleeping peacefully in the next room. From the beginning, Alice's testimony raised many doubts and questions. In addition, it soon became clear that the very pictures and videos proving Marcos's cheating, his wife received from the hands of a private detective only on May 20th, that is, after she had killed her husband. Then, as I said, Alice took these photos and videos to the parents of the businessman, saying that Marcos had abandoned her by running away with his mistress. We also managed to find Natasha Lima, who appeared in court as a witness. According to her, Marcos himself wanted a divorce, but frankly afraid of his wife, saying that she was mentally unstable and capable of terrible things. The last time Natasha saw her lover the day before his disappearance, he complained about the constant scandals in the family and said that after the sale of the company is going to move to live in Florida, where he plans to establish a new company. Taking Alice with him was not part of his plans. He was going to divorce her and forget her like a terrible dream. Another terrible discovery was the discovery by experts of blood in the lungs of the dead man, which indicated that Marcos was still alive and trying to breathe when his wife separated his head from the body. This is wild and horrifying. Alice herself vehemently denied this, insisting that he died instantly from a bullet. The pathologist also found that the same bullet entered Marcos's head at a rather odd angle, as if he was sitting or lying down, not expecting to be shot. So he didn't even try to defend himself or dodge. This contradicted Alice's account of her husband attacking her and her trying to defend herself. On top of that, almost all the witnesses who testified at the trial denied that Matsunaga could have hit his wife. Yes, he had a difficult character, could say various hurtful words, but in life never raised a hand on anyone. Everything looked as if Alice herself made up this episode, because Marcos could not refute anything. As a result, the court found Alice guilty of premeditated murder with particular cruelty and attempting to conceal the crime. Alice Matsunaga was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which many considered an extremely lenient punishment for such a crime. The parents of the deceased man are now responsible for the upbringing of their daughter.